Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the warm, hazy world of the Abbasid Caliphate's bathhouses. Yes, bathhouses, where every tile gleams, steam curls into high domed ceilings, and someone's always losing a sandal. Imagine the low murmur of voices bouncing gently off stone walls, the soft splash of water from brass buckets, and the earthy aroma of olive oil soap and cedarwood. You're stepping into a world lit by oil lamps and warmed by ancient ingenuity. You're here to relax, of course. But spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive this. Between the heat, the social rules, and that one time a water pipe exploded mid-scrub. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I promise not to splash you on purpose. And while you're drifting off, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Always curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the dusty alleys of 9th century Baghdad, the call to prayer still echoing behind you. The sun has dipped low, and a faint pink hue streaks the sky. In your hand, a woven satchel, inside, a threadbare towel, and your last copper dirham. You duck beneath a wooden archway and find yourself face to face with the local hammam. A little cracked around the corners, sure, but still noble in its geometry. Its tiled mosaic facade glints faintly in the twilight, welcoming you like an old friend. The doorman nods, swiping a palm over his bald head slick with steam. 1 hour? He asks, already reaching for the coin you haven't yet decided whether to part with. Inside, the temperature shifts, like stepping into a warm sponge. The air is thick, not unpleasantly so, just enough to slow your thoughts. The hammam glows from within, oil lamps set in tiny alcoves, casting a golden shimmer on the misty air. You catch a whiff of eucalyptus and lemon balm. Someone's brought the fancy soap tonight. You move through the antechamber, where sandals clatter and gossip flows louder than the fountains. You overhear one man whispering about a stolen book of Galen's medical texts. Another argues passionately about camel tariffs. The bathhouse, you realize, is more than a place to scrub your limbs. It's a thermal town square, a public lounge where politics, poetry, and petty squabbles get rinsed off alongside the day's dust. A young attendant appears with a wooden bucket and a ladle. He's no older than 12, but he's seen things. His voice is cracked from the steam and shouting, and he hands you a threadbare piece of cloth the size of a modern hand towel. That's your modesty covering. You try to fashion it into something resembling pants. It fails spectacularly. The first room is warm, dry, almost cozy. You sit on a smooth stone bench, letting your bones settle. Next to you, an elderly man hums tunelessly, drawing his name in the condensation on the wall. Nobody rushes here. Time puddles. From somewhere deeper, the sound of a bucket splashing echoes like a soft drumbeat. You know you'll soon be invited into the hot room where the real sweating happens. But for now, you exhale. The world slows. Above you, The dome arches like a night sky. Small glass windows dot the roof, their light filtered through rose-colored stone. Steam slips past them like lazy clouds. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse domes were inspired by Persian caravanserai or adapted from Roman hippocausts. Either way, they've perfected the ambience. You feel the stone warming your legs. An attendant pours water down a shallow groove, guiding it like a sleepy little stream to a drain at the far end. The plumbing here predates your local gyms by over 1,000 years. Pipes carved from clay, filters made of goat hair. It all works with the same quiet, creaky confidence as an old cat. A whispering pair of merchants shuffle past, their skin glistening, their beards combed. They nod at you like you're part of this soft-shelled society now. You smile back, even though your makeshift towel is slipping. Then a familiar voice, hoarse, theatrical, calls out your name. It's Fareed, the neighborhood calligrapher and occasional conspiracy theorist. You made it, he croaks. I saved us a spot in the warm pool, he winks. There's a man here who claims to have bathed with a cousin of the Caliph. You have no idea if that's impressive, embarrassing, or both. You follow Fareed down a narrow corridor, tiled in dark green. Here, the air thickens, humid as overcooked stew. Your lungs pull harder. Your pores begin to sigh. Somewhere deep in your body, a cramp you've been ignoring for days starts to loosen. You enter the central chamber. The floor is slick with splashed water, the walls weeping condensation. A wide, shallow basin glows beneath a shaft of lamp-lit mist. Men lean against the warm stone, quiet, as though half asleep. Someone lets out a soft moan of pleasure. You step in. The water is not scalding, it's wrapping paper warm. You sink slowly, careful not to disturb anyone's aura. A long moment passes. The only sounds are dripping, breathing, and a faint belch from someone who had too many lentils. You look around and wonder how many feet have stood here before yours. Thousands, millions. The hammam predates most of the city itself. Some say this very bath once hosted a delegation from the Tang dynasty. Others swear it was where Al-Khwarizmi first muttered about zero. Nobody can prove any of it, but in the bathhouse, truth always travels by steam. A boy enters, dragging a bundle of mint and wet towels. He begins to scrub an elderly merchant's back with a rough cloth, muttering lullabies. You lean your head back, eyes half closed, body floating in both water and time. Outside, the night deepens. Lanterns flicker against the haze. You have forgotten your sandals, your coin purse, your dinner plans. None of it matters. You are in Baghdad. You are in a bathhouse. You are exactly where you need to be. You haven't moved in what feels like hours. Your arms float gently at your sides, and the water's warmth has melted away the last traces of city dust from your skin. But hammam etiquette waits for no one. A new group arrives, loud, towel flapping, and clearly fresh from a merchant caravan, and a quietly pointed glance from an attendant suggests it's time for you to transition into the next phase of this steamy experience. You rise from the pool, every joint clicking like an old lockbox. Your borrowed cloth hangs somewhere between skirt and fashion disaster, but nobody cares. Modesty in the bathhouse is less about coverage and more about not slipping on wet tiles while trying to preserve dignity. The next chamber is warmer still, less steam, more structure. This is the intermediary space, the temperature Goldilocks zone. A few benches line the walls, and here, the rhythm of the hammam becomes almost military in its precision. You begin to understand that timing is everything. Bathhouse hours are no joke in Abbasid Baghdad. Strictly divided into sessions for men and women, with the occasional exception for children or religious holidays. Scholars argue over whether early morning or evening hours were more popular, but most agree timing meant everything. The wealthy came late after the merchants had cleared out. Women had afternoons when the light filtering through the domes was softest. And in certain quarters, clerics held special hours, prayer, then pumice. You glance at the brass sundial affixed to a post near the door. It's mostly for show, now, since most hammams run on instinct and experience. But it marks the shift points of the day when an entirely different group arrives. Each hour, each slotted ritual ensures that the bathhouse remains a space of flow, not chaos. And then there's the class system, because it's of course even in a room where everyone is half naked and slick with oil, status matters. The caliph's cousin doesn't share a bench with a camel herder, not unless he's very drunk or the plumbing has failed catastrophically. Higher status bathers pay for private chambers, fresher towels, better oil. You, a humble, semi-employed book copier, take your place with the mid-tier citizens, right next to a weaver who smells faintly of goat and lavender. The bath attendant returns, holding a shallow copper bowl. Inside, warm water swirls like a sleepy whirlpool. He offers it with a bow. This is for rinsing your feet, an Abbasid quirk of hygiene. They believed clean feet kept the soul anchored. Or maybe someone just hated dirty arches. You comply, splashing your soles while the water ripples over the stone channel and disappears into the cleverly sloped drain. Historians still argue whether the precise angles of these drains were borrowed from Persian Kennet systems or developed independently by Arab engineers. Either way, they're absurdly efficient. You'd kill for plumbing this smooth in your modern apartment. A trio of women pass through the outer corridor, heavily veiled, escorted by two female attendants. Their voices trail behind them like music. It's women's time in the eastern wing, and the hammam is quietly transitioning. Curtains are drawn, screens adjusted. The staff moves like stagehands in a very soap theater. It's fascinating how these transitions happen with such fluidity. The staff doesn't yell, doesn't need to. You just feel it. One group leaves, another glides in, like a well-timed orchestra of linen, oil, and foot washing. A bell chimes in the distance, just a small one, tied around the wrist of the oldest attendant. That's the cue for the steam room to begin its next boil. You hear a faint gurgling noise from deep below, where fire meets clay pipes. Soon the air will thicken again, a fresh batch of heat rising up from the stone. The weaver next to you stretches luxuriously, his limbs crackling like parchment. You ever notice, he says dreamily, that the days last longer once you've bathed? You nod. He's not wrong. Something about this place compresses stress and stretches time. You move now toward the hot room, different from the warm pool you just left. This is dry heat, oven heat, heat that hugs your skin a little too closely and whispers, "You sure you want to do this?" But you do, because this is where the magic happens, where sweat starts to pull impurities from your pores, or so the bathhouse manual would claim if anyone had bothered to write one. You step over the threshold. The heat hits your chest like an affectionate bear. Inside, stone benches form a square around a pit of softly glowing coals. No open flames, of course, just the memory of fire. A clever system of ducts channels the heat upward, distributing it through the walls and beneath the floor. This is underfloor heating, centuries before Europeans caught on. Romans had it, but the Abbasids perfected it. You lower yourself onto a warm slab. A thin towel is provided to protect your skin from roasting. Nearby, a man with silver hair sits motionless, eyes closed, palms up. You wonder if he's meditating or just very, very asleep. The heat seeps into your bones. Your nose starts to run slightly, and your thoughts slow down. This is where merchants sweat out travel aches, scholars loosen philosophical tangles, and your calligrapher friend Farid once hallucinated a talking goat. "It told me to switch inks," he swore. He never did. An attendant offers you a glass of something cool, infused with basil seeds and lemon. The contrast shocks your tongue. You nod in thanks, too heat-dazed to speak. And still, everything runs on time. Not clocks, not whistles, just generations of rhythm, handed down like recipes. Steam at this hour, cold rinse next, massage after, drying, dressing, and then back out into the dusty sprawl of the world. But not yet. Right now, you let the heat hold you like an old friend. Somewhere, a distant thud signals more fuel being shoveled into the hypocaust furnace. More heat, more time. Outside, the city ticks on, unaware of your sweaty enlightenment. Inside, you are clean, content, and just 1 degree above, gently poached. You're not sure how long you've been sitting in the heat, but your fingers have wrinkled like dried figs, and your brain feels delightfully fogged. Somewhere between too warm and mildly euphoric, you realize it's time to move again, not by choice, but because your body is quietly protesting. Either you leave or I melt. You push yourself up from the heated slab with a sound somewhere between a sigh and a grunt, and pad a pad across the stone floor toward the cooler rinsing chamber. Your towel clings to you like a wilted leaf, and a drop of sweat hangs precariously from your nose. Now you begin to notice the bathhouse's design. It's like a thermal storybook. Everything flows with intent, from hot to warm to cold, each room shaped to guide heat, water, and people in a gentle spiral of relaxation. The domed ceilings above each chamber aren't just pretty, they pull rising steam up and away, keeping the rooms from becoming too dense or disorienting. Architects of the Abbasid era didn't build randomly. They were methodical, mathematical, and obsessed with balance. Each bathhouse followed a general blueprint: an apoditerium, a tepidarium, a caldarium, and a frigidarium. But within that structure, there was room for flair. Take the tiles, for example. The ones beneath your feet right now are a mosaic of blues and greens, arranged like rippling fish scales. They're designed not just to delight the eye, but to reflect light in a way that softens the harshness of oil lamps. And those lamps, narrow-necked clay beauties, are placed in arched niches at calculated intervals, flickering like stars in a private sky. Historians still argue whether these architectural flourishes were purely functional or symbolic. Were the domes meant to mimic the heavens? Were the geometric tiles coded messages in ceramic? No one agrees, but it doesn't matter. You're too busy admiring how the light bounces off a single water droplet clinging to the lip of a stone spout. You step into the rinsing area. Here, a narrow channel of cold water runs continuously along the wall, pouring from copper lion heads with slightly goofy expressions. The noise is soothing, like a stream you'd fall asleep beside during a picnic that never happened. You sit beside one of the spouts, fill a small brass bowl, and begin pouring the cool water over your head. The shock makes you gasp. For a second, you're convinced your soul left your body and is now hiding in the corner, sulking, but the sensation sharpens your thoughts, resets your senses. This is what it's meant to do. The cold rinse isn't just refreshing, it's vital. Ancient physicians believed it closed your pores, sealed in the good vapors, and prevented illness. They didn't have modern germ theory, but they had their own wisdom. One popular Abbasid theory claimed that excessive heat made the brain soft. The cold rinse, then, was a mental tightening. Judging by how wide awake you suddenly feel, they might have been onto something. You pour another bowl over your neck, and the water runs down your back like a tiny waterfall escaping the mountains of your shoulder blades. You could get used to this. You probably shouldn't, but still. Around you, others perform similar rituals, though each person has their own rhythm. One man sings softly in Syriac between rinses. A young boy plays with a floating sliver of soap like it's a prized toy. A merchant in a faded turban rinses his feet with the focus of a monk. And yet again, the architecture accommodates all this life with elegance. There are sloped channels carved into the floor to guide excess water out. The walls are slightly curved to reduce echoes. The ceilings are ribbed, not for style, but to catch dripping condensation and keep it from plopping onto unsuspecting heads. Beneath all this grace and subtlety lies the true heart of the bathhouse, the hypocaust, the heating system, the unseen marvel. Down below your feet, a system of stone tunnels carries hot air from a fire chamber, warming the floors and the bottom parts of the walls. Slaves and workers stoke the fires day and night, feeding them with wood, dung, straw, and occasionally political pamphlets deemed too scandalous for daylight. That last one's a rumor, of course, probably. The floors, slightly elevated on pillars, allow heat to flow evenly, and above them, Layers of tile, stone, and clay trap and diffuse the warmth. This method wasn't new, borrowed in part from Roman and Byzantine systems, but the Abbasids made it sleeker, more energy efficient, and less smoky. You glance at a vent near the floor. Warm air curls lazily from it. Someone years ago figured out how to make that heat glide exactly where it needs to go, and here you are, reaping the benefits while trying to remember if you washed behind your ears. As you sit back, watching the copper lions spit endlessly into the trough, you realize something else. There's a rhythm here, a tempo built into the walls themselves. You came in hot and tired, got steamed like a dumpling, and now you're slowly being cooled, dried, reset. A bell rings once, barely audible. That's the signal for drying and oiling. You rise reluctantly, like a well-steeped tea bag. The rinse room has done its job, and the next phase awaits. Before you leave, you look one last time at the tiling under your feet, now glistening with pooled water. Someone, somewhere, spent years designing this pattern. It may not have earned him fame or fortune, but you'll remember it long after your skin returns to its normal, less prune-like state. You shuffle through a low arch, and the steam finally begins to fade. You breathe in cooler air, tinged with rose oil and faint sandalwood. You think you're ready for what comes next. You are warm, rinsed, and architecturally impressed. Your steps slow as the air cools. Behind you, the rinse chamber still echoes with splashes and low murmurs, but ahead lies a quieter space. You step into what bathers simply call the oil room, less poetic perhaps than the chamber of repose some pretentious poets insist on, but deeply necessary. It's where you anoint yourself like a minor deity preparing for a banquet, or at least where you try not to drop the slippery soap. The space is small and square, with polished wooden benches lining the walls and a few low stools carved from dense cedar. The scent here is divine. Not incense-heavy like a mosque, nor overly perfumed like the palace court, just earthy, grounded, and herbal. You catch notes of cedarwood, olive oil, rosewater, perhaps a little frankincense tucked into a corner for flair. It's soothing in the way a forest after rain is soothing, not overwhelming, just right. An attendant greets you wordlessly, hands you a cloth bundle, and gestures toward a polished copper bowl on a small table. You unwrap the bundle to find an array of small flasks, soft cloths, and what you first mistake for a sponge, but quickly realize is a particularly scratchy loofah. It looks like it was harvested directly from an opinionated palm tree. You settle onto a bench. The copper bowl is filled with warm oil, olive, infused with a pinch of thyme and lemon rind. You dip your fingers in and begin massaging it into your arms, starting from the wrists and moving up with slow, deliberate strokes. The oil is smooth, fragrant, and slightly sticky in that reassuring, I'm moisturizing like a Roman senator kind of way. In Abbasid times, hygiene wasn't just about health. It was an aesthetic, a ritual, almost a moral duty. Being clean wasn't vain, it was virtuous, and oil was everything. Soap existed, Aleppo was famous for it, but oils were used more often. They sealed the skin, softened the hair, and made you smell like someone who understood poetry. And, oh, the variety. There were oils for status, for scent, for medicine. Rich merchants might use jasmine oil imported from India. Travelers stuck with castor or sesame. The particularly daring might blend in musk or cinnamon, depending on how spicy they felt and how much coin they'd saved from market day. You, tonight, are blessed with lemon thyme, a middle-class classic. Your skin begins to gleam under the golden lamplight. You apply the oil slowly, almost reverently, not just because it feels nice, though it very much does, but because this is a rare moment of complete stillness. Outside, Baghdad bustles and burns with life, but in here, beneath a low roof and flickering lamp shadows, you are just a body, and the oil is a soft reminder that the body deserves kindness. You move to your legs. Your hands are now slick and fragrant. The loofah comes next, a gentle scrape, exfoliating, removing dead skin and dead worries. The sensation is oddly satisfying, like peeling old labels off a jar or unrolling a fresh scroll without tearing it. Nearby, another bather hums a tune in a minor key. Someone else sneezes, and the sound is met with a chorus of soft laughter. You hear someone mumble about too much rose oil. Now I smell like my aunt. It's the kind of idle chatter that floats easily in this space, rising with the scent of herbs and warm skin. Bathhouse oils weren't just for pampering. Abbasid physicians, including the famed Al-Razi, wrote extensively about their medicinal properties. Thyme was said to sharpen the senses. Olive oil soothed the joints. Camphor cooled fevers. Historians still argue whether these treatments worked as advertised, but the cultural commitment to them was real. Anointing wasn't just skin deep, it was a layered, fragrant science. You pour a final measure into your palm and run it through your hair. The effect is immediate. Your curls settle, your scalp tingles, and you momentarily resemble one of those oddly serene figures on a Persian miniature painting. A boy walks by holding a basket of fresh herbs, mint, basil, a twist of lavender. He tosses a sprig onto the coals in the next room. The scent trails in like an invisible ribbon, curling around your ankles. You think of adding mint to your next oil blend, then wonder if you've just become a bathhouse connoisseur. With the oiling complete, you recline on a cedar bench, arms folded, feet bare, and mind wandering. The wooden slats beneath you are warm from earlier bodies, and the subtle creak of settling joints creates a rhythm almost as steady as a lullaby. And somewhere nearby, someone begins to snore, not a loud, disruptive snore, but a tiny puffing sound, like a baby camel trying to whistle. You smile, eyes half closed. The hammam has claimed another temporary napper. You think, too, about the sheer quantity of oils required to keep a bathhouse like this running. Some estimates suggest gallons per day, especially in large cities. Entire sections of the market were devoted to oil sellers. It was a mini economy, this scent-laced, slippery business. Of course, not every oil worked wonders. There was a brief period, historians whisper about it, when someone tried to mix crocodile dung with aloe for skin vitality. It did not end well. The fashion died quickly, and the crocodiles were reportedly quite relieved. You rise, slow and reluctant. Your skin now glows like polished brass. You feel lighter, smoother, quietly radiant. There's one final stage left before re-entering the real world, and that's drying and dressing. But for now, you linger one last moment. A single oil lamp flickers in its niche. A droplet of water plinks from the ceiling onto the floor. Somewhere far off, a storyteller begins a tale in the antechamber, something about a caliph, a cucumber, and an unfortunate misunderstanding. You'll never know how it ends. You breathe in. You are fragrant, glistening, and deeply amused. You glide out of the oil room like a well-greased cat, your feet whispering against the warm tile. The air shifts again, less steamy now, tinged with the faint smell of wood ash, and, is that cinnamon? You can't be sure. Everything smells a little dreamy in here. As you cross into the next chamber, you're greeted by a familiar sight, the Sakha boys. Or, as Farid, your calligrapher friend, once dubbed them, the Bucket Brigade of Baghdad. They're young, most no older than 13, barefoot, shirtless, their skin slick from both labor and the humidity they spend every hour inside. Each one carries a large goatskin water bag slung across his back, sealed at the ends with wooden taps. It makes them look like tiny, determined camels stomping gently through steam clouds. Their task? To keep the bathhouse supplied with water, fresh, hot, cold, and everywhere in between. And they do it tirelessly, with a rhythm that would make any modern logistics firm cry jealous tears. You watch one boy refill a marble basin near the wall. He lifts the goatskin bag, tips it with a practiced elbow nudge, and water flows out like a silken ribbon. No spills, no waste. It's oddly mesmerizing. You half expect him to bow at the end, like a performer. Water, in the Abbasid Caliphate, wasn't a given. Baghdad may have been built near the mighty Tigris, but aqueducts don't clean themselves, and reservoirs have been known to throw tantrums during summer. So the city relied on a caste of water carriers, sakas, to keep things flowing. They hauled water not just for bathhouses, but for homes, mosques, marketplaces, and anyone who didn't own a private well, which was nearly everyone. Some sakas were freelancers, carrying engraved leather tokens from neighborhoods they served. Others were employees of Waqf-funded bathhouses, their wages coming from religious endowments. The more elite among them wore sashes and carried stamped scrolls identifying them as certified water distributors of the 3rd District, which frankly sounds much fancier than it looked. And yet without them, this bathhouse and all others would grind to a very smelly halt. One boy passes by carrying not one, but 2 skins. His expression is somewhere between heroic determination and deep regret. He shoots you a look that says, "You think oiling is hard. Try dodging sweaty feet with 60 pounds on your back." You raise an eyebrow. He snorts. Mutual respect is established. The water they carry comes from public fountains, underground cisterns, and in some lucky cases, a direct aqueduct feed from the river's bend. The water is filtered through sand, cooled in clay jars, and blessed by a local imam if it's meant for religious washing. Some even whisper that water blessed during the call to prayer flows better, but only if collected with a copper pail. You move toward a small alcove where a man is seated beside an ancient-looking boiler, carefully watching a trickle of steam snake from a spout. The boiler's fire pit gurgles quietly. It's fed from below by another group of workers you rarely see. Their job? Keep the temperature just right. Not too scalding, not too tepid, just perfectly warm, like the feeling of waking up 10 minutes before your alarm and realizing you can go back to sleep. Fuel varies. Wood, of course, but also charcoal, dried dung, and occasionally palm husks. Each type gives a different quality to the steam. Dung burns low and slow, like a conspiracy unfolding. Wood crackles, pleasant and nostalgic. Palm husks, pungent but oddly invigorating. Some patrons swear by them. Fuel for the boilers was carted in daily by donkey or cart, and often stored in separate chambers to avoid awkward moments like, say, setting the entire antechamber on fire. Not that it ever happened, except that one time, and yes, Fareed was involved. The boiler operator, an old man with the eyebrows that deserve their own postal code, nods at you without a word. He pokes the furnace with a long iron rod, adjusts a lever, and leans back again, satisfied. A master of his domain. There's a strange intimacy to this part of the bathhouse. You're not scrubbing or rinsing now. You're just watching, learning how the water dances from source to spout, how the heat is conjured by men you never see, how a child's careful step keeps the whole show running. You think about how many people touch the water before it ever kisses your skin. The well digger, the sakha, the fire stoker, the boy who cleaned the basin with a bundle of dried grass. It's a chain of effort, invisible but essential. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse system was truly sustainable. Some say the water demands strained city resources. Others argue the hammam network improved public health to the point of balancing out any scarcity. What's clear is that nobody in their right mind skipped the bath. Not if they could help it. A commotion draws your attention. A sakha has slipped, and a burst of water has splashed dramatically across the floor. Nobody laughs. The boy looks horrified, but the boiler man waves him off, handing him a fresh cloth. The boy mops, crisis averted. All part of the cycle. You lean against a marble column, watching the last rays of daylight filter through a patterned window. The light refracts in the water droplets, clinging to the edges of copper basins. It's strangely beautiful. Someone walks by humming an old tune, a lullaby about rain. You hum along, not even realizing you know the melody. Maybe it's the water. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe you're just finally slowing down. You are well-oiled, well-rinsed, and deeply grateful to the anonymous chain of damp heroes who keep your bath exactly as it should be. You lean into the marble column a little longer than you meant to, its surface pleasantly cool against your temple. But then the scent hits you, earthy, smoky, and unmistakably manure adjacent. Ah, yes. Welcome to the furnace wing, or as Fareed once called it, the infernal armpit of paradise. The transition is not subtle. The air here is hotter, drier, and laced with the aroma of the bathhouse's less glamorous side, fuel. Not the elegant kind, like sandalwood incense or jasmine oil. No, this is raw material, gathered in piles and shoveled by the bushel, dung bricks, chopped wood, dried palm fronds, and the occasional wad of mysterious combustible fluff no one likes to talk about. This is the engine room, where the real work happens, out of sight mostly, though never out of smell. The bathhouse can be poetic, artistic, even divine, but behind every gentle steam puff is a sweating, soot-covered worker dragging a wheelbarrow full of donkey droppings. The fuel yard, technically behind the main bath chambers, connects via a narrow hallway you now step into. It's dark, lit only by 2 flickering oil lamps. The walls are blackened with soot, their tiles long stripped away by heat and time. You feel like you've walked into the backstage of a theater where the play is fire and everyone is slightly singed. A worker lumbers past you, hauling a sack of chopped tamarisk wood over his shoulder. He doesn't speak, just nods and keeps moving, eyes glazed from hours of stoking, hauling, and dodging ash. His arms are muscled, not from training, but from decades of lifting the raw stuff that keeps people warm, clean, and fragrant. Fuel was no minor affair in Abbasid times. With bathhouses running nearly every day, the demand for heat was relentless. Not just any wood would do either. Tamarisk, acacia, date palm trunks all burned differently. Tamarisk gave long, steady heat. Palm fronds caught quickly, but faded fast. And then there was dried dung, humble, reliable, endlessly renewable. You pass by a low bench where fuel is sorted. A young boy picks bits of straw from bricks of hardened dung, stacking them into neat piles like he's building the worst gingerbread house ever. These bricks were once common across Baghdad, sold in open-air markets weighed like fruit and prized for their low smoke output. Yes, really. There's something almost endearing about the thought of people haggling over camel patties like prized spices. Too dry, one might say. This one's got too much grit. I only burn goat, none of that cow stuff. The bathhouse furnace is tucked into a stone vault, squat and square, with a front opening about the size of a goat cart. A fire glows inside, low and steady, with heat radiating outward like a soft growl. You approach it carefully. A worker pokes the embers with a wrought iron rod that looks like it's been used since the dawn of time. He doesn't greet you, but you get the feeling that if he did, it would be in one syllable, something like, He adjusts a side vent, adding just enough airflow to keep the fire breathing. This isn't guesswork, it's craftsmanship. Temperature control is everything. Too hot, and the marble cracks. Too cool, and the steam rooms become awkwardly damp caves. You sit for a moment on a low stool near the back wall, feeling the pulse of heat through the stone beneath your feet. You're close now to the hypocaust system you've heard so much about. Beneath the floor, hot air winds its way through channels and chambers, heating the rooms above with precision. Some historians say these furnace keepers were trained from boyhood. Others argue they were just the only ones who didn't complain about soot in their eyebrows. Either way, their work was vital. The hammam didn't run on hopes and incense. It ran on fire, sweat, and animal waste. A heavy thud draws your attention. A sack of wood is dropped near the door. Two teenage workers grunt as they unload more fuel, one muttering about a blister, the other too tired to care. They remind you of the bathhouse's larger purpose. It isn't a palace spa. It's a social machine, fueled by labor and heat and elbow grease. Every layer of your comfort has a team behind it. There's a saying Fareed once shared with a philosophical squint. In every bath, someone must shovel. He claimed it was ancient wisdom. You suspect he made it up after slipping on the soap tray, but still, it rings true. You stand and take one last look at the furnace. The embers pulse like a slow heartbeat. The heat is deeper here, more elemental. It clings to your skin like invisible silk. You leave the fuel room quietly, offering a silent thank you to the men who keep it alive. Back in the outer corridor, the shift in temperature is immediate. You exhale, half expecting smoke to curl from your nostrils. Your skin glows slightly, a mix of oil, sweat, and dignity barely maintained. And still, above all that pungent haze, you catch the faintest scent of lemon balm and lavender wafting in from the main chamber. The bathhouse is reclaiming you. You're ready to return to its scented embrace. You are warmed, humbled, and smelling only mostly like donkey fuel. You slip back into the hammam's main corridor like a well-oiled eel returning from the underworld. Behind you, the furnace crackles away, tended by soot-streaked ghosts with impressive deltoids. Ahead, the bathhouse blossoms again into its steamy, aromatic rhythm, a return to civility, warm stone, and the musical splash of half-heard conversations. This time, you step into a chamber just off the main pool, smaller, but humming with a different energy. Not hotter, not colder, just livelier. There's more talking here, more movement. You've entered what might be called the bathhouse's social zone. Less about scrubbing, more about storytelling, gossip, and light political scheming between gulps of mint water. The hammam, after all, isn't just for getting clean. It's a social centrifuge, a place where reputations swirl, rumors are spun, and half the city's affairs are decided in towels and whispers. You take a seat on a low bench beside a squat marble basin. The water trickles continuously from a copper tap shaped like a lion's head, its expression slightly judgmental, like it knows you skipped behind the ears scrubbing. Across from you, 3 men are engaged in a spirited but hushed debate. One wears the trimmed beard and quietly scandalized look of a bureaucrat. Another has ink-stained fingers, clearly a scribe. And the third? Well, he's gesturing so wildly with his ladle that he might be a poet or just someone who got overexcited about his foot scrub. You lean back and observe. Their conversation winds between court gossip. Apparently, the vizier has switched barbers and philosophical questions. Did Aristotle ever bathe? Was steam conducive to contemplation? Did jinn prefer eucalyptus or myrrh? You try not to laugh, but a quiet snort escapes. One of them notices you. "You're new," he says, wiping his forehead with a cloth, or at least, "not from this quarter." You nod. "First time in this hammam?" He grins. "Then you haven't met Sharif." A ripple passes through the room. Some eyes glance toward the curtain in the far corner. A moment later, it parts, and in walks a man with the aura of someone who has scrubbed many backs and overheard much more than that. Sharif, the head hammam attendant. He's tall, with sleeves rolled to the elbow and a towel slung dramatically over one shoulder like a general about to lead his troops into the battle of body odor. His gaze sweeps the room like a falcon assessing its prey. But instead of talons, he carries a long-handled scrub brush and a basin of orange flower water. You've heard about attendants like him, part masseur, part confidant, part unofficial intelligence officer. In bathhouses across the Abbasid world, these men held a curious power. They knew who bathed where, with whom, how often, and for how long. More than a few political careers met their end because someone forgot that a quiet bathhouse was never truly quiet. Sharif spots you and walks over with the slow, confident pace of a man who's removed more calluses than you've read books. "You need the scrub?" he asks, voice soft but firm. You nod. He gestures for you to sit near a basin filled with warm, soapy water, then begins his work with practiced ease. His hands move with rhythmic pressure, scrubbing arms, shoulders, back, the soles of your feet. It's not gentle, exactly, but it's not harsh either. It's the kind of touch that says, "I know where your tension lives, and I'm coming for it." You exhale. A little moan slips out. Someone across the room laughs. You don't care. As Sharif works, he hums, something wordless but oddly comforting. Between strokes, he murmurs, "You carry stress in your shoulders. Too much writing." You blink. "I'm a copyist." He nods knowingly. "Script is heavy work." And then, "Did you hear about the merchant from Wasit who tried to bribe the bath staff to reserve the hot room for his cat?" You pause mid-breath. You're joking. He isn't. The men around you chime in with their own tales. A poet who refused to bathe in water unless it had been stirred with a rosewood spoon. A minor noble who brought a pet parrot that repeated political secrets, and a visiting scholar who demanded total silence, only to fart spectacularly during a meditation session. The hammam, it seems, is full of stories, many of them scrubbed into your skin, whether you ask for them or not. Historians still argue whether attendants like Sharif were merely workers or something more, a subtle intelligence network feeding whispers back to higher powers. The Abbasid court, after all, was famous for its bureaucracy and love of information gathering. And where better to gather information than a place where people speak freely, in towels and steam? Sharif finishes his work with a bucket of cold water poured gently over your back. You shudder, but the clean shock resets your nerves like a snapped string, finding tune again. "Good?" he asks. You nod, skin tingling. He hands you a towel and drifts off to his next client, leaving you slightly stunned, freshly polished, and now a little worried about what secrets you may have muttered in the steam. You dry off slowly, the cloth slightly coarse but strangely satisfying. Around you, voices rise and fall. Someone argues about grain taxes. Another man complains about his wife's cousin, who believes the earth is shaped like a fig. You recline against the wall, warmed by the floor beneath you and the low-level hum of ongoing chatter. You are clean, exfoliated, and possibly a minor contributor to the bathhouse rumor mill. You sit quietly for a while, wrapped in your drying cloth, mind slowly rippling like the last puddle after a splash. The air has settled now, still warm, but gentler. The noise of the other bathers hums like bees at a respectful distance. Everything in the hammam feels like it's shifting into a slower gear, as if the building itself knows it's nearly time to rest. But just before you can slide fully into a post-scrub daze, a man strides in, robe swept back like a curtain, slippers clicking with subtle authority. He's not dripping wet, not glazed with oil, and clearly not here to bathe. That's when you remember, the hammam isn't just for washing bodies. It's also for washing the city's conscience. This, as you'll learn, is Idris, one of the bathhouse stewards, and more importantly, an occasional informant for the city magistrate. Or so Farid insists, usually while applying his hair oil with the solemnity of a monk preparing incense. Idris's job, to oversee order, not just soap and sandals, but who enters, who exits, and what they whisper under their breath. In a city as intricate as Baghdad, no space was left to chance, including this most private of public spaces. The Abbasid Caliphate, sophisticated and sprawling, valued hygiene, but it also understood the hammam as a tool of soft power. These bathhouses weren't only a convenience. They were civic infrastructure, public forums, and, if needed, listening posts. Not in the menacing spy in the rafters sort of way, but in a subtler sense. Attendants remembered faces, stewards recorded usage patterns, and certain patrons, marked by privilege or paranoia, would enter only with bodyguards standing awkwardly outside, pretending they weren't terrified of towel-clad assassination. Idris's presence, then, is like the occasional ripple in an otherwise still pool, a reminder that this place, relaxing as it is, operates within the greater machinery of the Caliphate. Not a threat, just a nudge, a wet, warm nudge with political implications. You watch him move from room to room, nodding at attendants, scanning the crowd. He stops by a trio of merchants, whispering too closely. Nothing is said, but they promptly return to discussing sesame futures at full volume. In some bathhouses, the role of steward even extended to managing disputes over towel theft, queue cutting, or particularly aggressive loofah techniques. The hammam might be a sanctuary, but human pettiness knows no architectural boundary. A story floats to mind, Farid's, again, naturally, about the time a prominent astrologer refused to leave the hot room during women's hours because Venus was in steam alignment. He was removed, clothed hastily, and forced to bathe under a cold fountain of shame. There were rules here, codified, sometimes posted, others simply understood. You didn't shout. You didn't bring in food unless it was fruit and discreet. You didn't flirt openly, and you definitely didn't try to bribe your way to a private pool with promises of exotic parrots. The hammam functioned as a quiet enforcer of civic behavior. By providing a clean, respectable space for everyone, from ink-stained scholars to soot-covered furnace boys, it helped dissolve certain tensions while reinforcing others. Everyone soaked, everyone sweated, but not everyone scrubbed shoulders. Some scholars still debate whether the bathhouse helped flatten social hierarchies or merely coated them in rose-scented oil. Certainly, the Caliph himself had his own bath, a private one, with walls of marble and attendants who wore silken gloves. But the public hammams still mattered, still welcomed the dusty, the weary, the ordinary. And sometimes they hosted something stranger, public rituals. During the hottest months, city officials might sponsor free bath days, funded by endowments and charitable foundations. Bathhouses became almost festive, decorated with palm fronds and lanterns, with special herbal blends added to the steam, basil for clarity, chamomile for peace, and one controversial year, garlic. That was not repeated. In certain neighborhoods, hammams hosted religious washings for large groups, synchronizing ablutions before prayer. These moments, often chaotic and wet, still held a reverence. Water was sacred. Cleanliness was spiritual. Even in the mild chaos of shared buckets and borrowed towels, there was intention. Tonight, though, the hammam is quieter, orderly. Idris finishes his circuit and vanishes behind a screen, likely into an office you hadn't even noticed. Perhaps he's making notes, or sipping mint tea, or updating his secret scroll titled People Who Talk Too Much During Oil Scrubs. You lean your head back against the warm tile. Someone is reciting verses from the Quran a few chambers down, voice soft and measured. It threads through the air like incense, rising gently with the last curls of steam. You feel, in this moment, how the hammam is part of something larger, not just a place to bathe, but a mechanism for peacekeeping, not by force, but by rhythm. The rhythm of heat, rinse, rest. The rhythm of sharing space with strangers, of seeing and being seen, of remembering you're part of a city, a culture, a caliphate. Even in your near-sleepy state, you smile. It's comforting to know that somewhere in this carefully tiled universe, there's someone like Idris, walking the lines between clean and disorder, wielding power with a glance and a clipboard. You are observant, freshly reminded of structure, and still wondering if towel bribery is a viable strategy. You shift slightly on your bench, stretching your legs and allowing the warmed stone beneath you to soothe your muscles. Somewhere behind you, a ladle clinks against a basin, and the sound rings like a temple bell, a perfect, hollow note in the hush of the chamber. But even as you bask in your slippery enlightenment, you can't help but wonder about one very pragmatic detail, the cost. Because, let's be honest, however lovely the eucalyptus-infused steam, however mesmerizing the geometric tile work, none of this comes free. Someone has to pay for the water, the wood, the boy running barefoot with buckets twice his weight. Even paradise charges admission. A few men walk by, laughing in that exaggerated, slightly too loud way that tells you they just closed a trade deal and are bathing to celebrate. They wear robes just a touch finer, their towels thicker, and you catch a whiff of rare myrrh oil as they pass. Definitely from the upper crust. You're on the respectably broke but still invested in hygiene tier. Public bathhouses in the Abbasid Caliphate generally offered 3 levels of access. The base fee was modest, enough for entry, a rinse, and a basic scrub. Just don't expect a marble bench or a private pool. A copper dirham would get you through the door and into the warm water, but you'd better bring your own soap. The second tier included towel service, oil application, and a half-decent back scrub, maybe a glass of cold rose water if the steward liked you. This is where most artisans, scribes, and mid-tier merchants found themselves. And then there was the full experience: personal attendant, private chamber, custom-scented oil blends, fruit platters, and, in some cases, a singer to gently hum while you dried off. The kinds of things that make you question whether your life's trajectory could somehow still involve marrying into the vizier's family. You think of your own entrance fee, 1 coin, pressed into the attendant's palm with what you hoped was casual confidence. It bought you a good soak and a respectable oil, but you'd notice the sideways glance when you didn't tip. Ah, yes, the hidden economy of the hammam, tipping. Though not technically required, tipping your bath attendant was seen as polite, even essential. Sharif, the head attendant, wouldn't chase you down if you didn't cough up a few coppers, but he would remember. Next time, you might find your towel a little smaller, your water mysteriously cooler, the massage just a tad more exfoliative than necessary. Farid once claimed he got splashed with a surprise bucket of cold water after trying to leave without tipping during Ramadan. He insisted it was an accident. No one believed him. Attendants, masseurs, water boys, they all operated in a kind of microeconomy fueled by tips, side deals, and long-standing client relationships. The wealthier bathers often had a favorite boy who brought them their preferred towel, scrubbed with exactly the right pressure, and even knew which stories to repeat and which to pretend they hadn't overheard. Occasionally, you'd hear whispers about corruption, attendants who sold secrets heard in the steam, or who arranged after-hours appointments for a very different kind of massage. These were rare and punished harshly if discovered, but the rumors swirled like steam regardless. Some bathhouses were fully private, owned by wealthy families or guilds. These were rarer and often doubled as networking hubs. If you were invited to one of these, it meant someone wanted your attention or your favor. But the majority were public, municipally funded or supported through Waqf endowments, charitable trusts that ensured even the poor had access to a clean soak now and then. In fact, certain hammams posted signs declaring free on Fridays for the poor and pious. You could imagine the queues stretching around the block. And yet, even in the free tiers, nothing was truly without cost. The social currency was just as important as the silver kind. Behave poorly, hog a basin, speak too loudly, insult the attendant, and you'd find yourself subtly shunned. Fewer greetings, cold stares. That one sponge mysteriously unavailable. In the hammam, social norms were as precise as the steam temperature. You watch as a boy discreetly brings a tray of figs and dates to a reclining older man with embroidered slippers. A small purse clinks as it changes hands. A nod is exchanged, and the boy vanishes, smooth, practiced, no drama. You wonder, idly, what it would take to live like that. A few more clients, a better patron, a miraculous poetry contest win. You make a mental note to ask Farid how one submits verses to the court, and then your attention drifts back to your current reality. Your robe is slightly damp, your coin pouch significantly lighter, and your stomach starting to growl. Luxury is lovely, but so is lentil stew. Still, you don't regret a single copper. The bathhouse may cost you a coin, maybe two with tipping, but what it gives in return, warmth, ease, the slow unspooling of tension, feels like a fair exchange. A man nearby chuckles, as if reading your thoughts. You know, he says, swirling water in a brass bowl, the best bath I ever took was when I couldn't afford it. Snuck in, got caught, but the steward let me stay, said I looked like I needed it more than he needed the coin. You raise your brows. And now? Oh, now I'm a moneylender. I bathe twice a week, tip generously, and make sure the poor kid at the door gets his share. You nod. A nice story. Probably true, or close enough. You rise to refill your water glass, feeling lighter, not just from the bath, from the realization that even in the Abbasid world, comfort had a price, but decency, kindness, and a good scrub. Those were sometimes free. You are rinsed, respectably broke, and plotting your next tip with tactical precision. You carry your glass of cold water carefully, as though it's the last one in Baghdad, which in this heat it just might feel like. A small bench near the wall beckons, shaded just by an overhanging mosaic alcove. You settle there, enjoying the cool sip and the way your pores hum like bees after the long soak. It's at this precise moment, when your muscles have melted, your thoughts have thinned, and you're contemplating a nap with one arm still holding your cup, that a man flops dramatically onto the bench beside you. He groans as though he's just crossed the desert. His left sandal is missing. Back again, Farid, you murmur without looking. Always, he croaks, fanning himself with a damp towel. My joints ache, my nose is full of dust, and I've been cursed by a wandering storyteller. Let me guess, you say. You challenged him to a poetry duel. Farid sniffs with theatrical offense. He rhymed caliph with saliva. I had to intervene. You chuckle, but Farid's arrival signals something else. The bathhouse's role not just as a place for cleansing, but as a clinic of sorts, a wellness center, Abbasid style. And not just in the my skin glows like oiled parchment sense. Hammams were a core part of the medical toolkit, especially in a city like Baghdad, where doctors doubled as philosophers, astrologers, and occasional bath consultants. Did you know, Farid says, already halfway into a story, that Al-Razi, yes, the Al-Razi, used to prescribe steam baths for melancholy? You nod. Of course you know. Everyone does. Al-Razi, the polymath physician and grandmaster of herbal treatments, was famous for treating both body and spirit. To him, and many physicians of his time, hot water wasn't just for skin, it was medicine. The bathhouse was his clinic with tiles. Patients with arthritis prescribed a long soak, sore muscles, steam, then oil, then rest, skin conditions, exfoliation, and a rub of sulfur soap. Digestive complaints, steam plus herbal infusions. Gloomy disposition, a cheerful attendant, soft lighting, and possibly a fruit tray. Even madness, that most mysterious of maladies, was sometimes treated with steam, cold rinses, and silence. The mind, they believed, could be calmed by heat and rhythm. And sitting here, with your best friend squinting at his own feet, you can see the logic. Historians still debate just how effective hammam-based treatments were. Did the heat truly purge toxins? Were illnesses really sweated out or just temporarily silenced? No consensus exists. But the fact remains, Abbasid physicians included the hammam in their prescriptions as routinely as modern doctors recommend hydration. I once met a man, Farid says, stretching out a leg, who claimed his eyesight improved after a month of daily steam baths. Did it? No. He walked into a donkey cart the very next morning, but his confidence was dazzling. You laugh, and somewhere nearby, someone sneezes. The sound is followed by a polite murmur of, "May God grant you health," spoken in a dozen different dialects. Sickness, of course, was always a concern. With shared water, damp towels, and warm communal air, the bathhouse could be a breeding ground. But the Abbasids were surprisingly meticulous. Rules were enforced. Soap had to be rinsed properly. Sick patrons sometimes barred, and the water constantly replaced and redirected. Some bathhouses even had their own in-house healers, people like Ibrahim the bone setter, who worked miracles on stiff shoulders with a crack and a prayer, or Hajj Mariam, a widowed herbalist who dispensed infused oils and unsolicited life advice in equal measure. There were also traveling healers who passed through hammams, offering questionable cures for coin. You once saw a man try to sell ground pearls as an arthritis remedy. It worked only if you believed in the placebo power of crushed jewelry. Even the attendants doubled as informal medics. Sharif, the scrub master, could identify a pulled muscle just by watching someone limp into the room. He once cured Farid's stiff neck with a single twist and a slap that still echoes in your memory. Of course, not all treatments were so hands-on. Farid gestures to his knee. The healer said I had wind in the joints, prescribed ginger root and a steam bath twice a week. And you followed the advice? Almost, he says, scratching his elbow. I added cinnamon for flavor. You roll your eyes. It's not tea, Farid. Everything is tea if you believe in yourself, he replies sagely. But as silly as it sounds, there's a wisdom to it. The hammam was a place where medicine wasn't confined to pills and potions. Healing was ambient. It came in the form of gentle touch, warm water, quiet laughter, and the constant reminder that the body, however imperfect, deserved care. You stand, legs a little wobbly from the heat, and move to the basin to rinse your hands and face. The cold water sharpens your senses. Farid mutters something about cucumber compresses and the dignity of being moisturized. A few men nearby are discussing the best oils for aching joints. One claims the answer is goat butter, heated over moonlight. No one argues. You return to your seat, refreshed. A boy passes, leaving behind a small bowl of dried herbs, thyme, mint, chamomile. You crush a leaf between your fingers, inhale, and feel your lungs stretch wide with gratitude. You are soothed, treated, and convinced that laughter, heat, and herbal compresses might just be the most effective healthcare plan ever invented. You and Farid sit side by side in companionable silence, broken only by the occasional slosh of water or the shuffle of soft-soled feet. The hammam has quieted slightly, voices dimming, the steam no longer rising in great plumes, but curling lazily in the warm air, as if it too is getting sleepy. And then the sound shifts. High-pitched giggles echo from deeper within the structure, followed by the distinct clap of slippers on wet tile. You turn, eyebrows raised. Farid grins. "Women's hours," he murmurs, tapping the bench. "We should wrap it up before they politely throw us out." He's not wrong. The hammam, by long-standing tradition and very clear signage, operates on alternating gendered hours. Men and women share the bathhouse, but not at the same time. And when the women's session begins, the entire rhythm changes. You quickly towel off and make your way into the front atrium, where a few other straggling men are gathering their things and brushing last-minute oil into their beards. The air here is drier, tinged now with rose and lemon, the olfactory calling card of the incoming crowd. You linger just long enough to watch the transformation begin. The attendants shift, most of the male staff replaced by a handful of women wearing simple linen wraps and carrying trays of fresh linens. Curtains are drawn, lamps are trimmed, voices are softer, but more layered, more animated, even musical. The women's hours in the hammam are not merely about cleanliness. They are ritual, reunion, and refuge. A group of women enters through the private side entrance. They remove their veils, unwrapping layer by layer with the ease of practice. Underneath, vibrant dresses, loose hair, gold bangles stacked at the wrist. One carries a bundle wrapped in silk. It's a bridal gift, judging by the embroidered flowers. A wedding is imminent. Inside, the mood shifts. The hammam becomes a feminine sanctuary, veiled from the city's judgment, free from the gaze of men and the noise of the outer world. Here, women soak, scrub, gossip, plot, soothe, and sometimes weep. A young bride-to-be sits gingerly on the warm bench, knees tucked under her, while older women gather around her, clucking approvingly. They unwrap packages of rose oil, beeswax hair balm, and a handful of dried orange peels. Her face is nervous, her hands fidgeting. One aunt leans in and whispers something that makes the entire circle burst into laughter. This is preparation, not just for marriage, but for transformation. In many quarters, the pre-wedding hammam was as important as the ceremony itself. It was where advice was passed, rituals performed, and strength conferred. Farid once snuck a peek at a women's hammam day, purely for artistic research, he claimed. He was promptly spotted, soaked, and ejected by a 10-year-old girl wielding a sandal. He later called it a spiritual cleansing by force. You smile at the memory, and though you remain outside now, it's easy to imagine what unfolds. Women helping each other wash, applying henna, sharing stories. A baby might cry briefly, soothed by the rhythmic pat of wet cloth. Older women sit quietly, sipping herbal infusions and muttering observations that may or may not be compliments. Historians still debate just how autonomous these female spaces were. Some argue they offered true respite from patriarchal structures. Others insist that surveillance extended even here, through staff, through gossip, through social codes, likely. The truth is in between. But what's undeniable is that these hours belonged to women, and they made them their own. You notice how different the sounds are, less formal, more overlapping. Laughter here doesn't apologize. There's a freedom in the way women move through the space. Some are modest, wrapped tight. Others are bare to the waist, confident, bold. No judgment, only mutual understanding. One of the attendants sings softly while preparing a bowl of scented steam. Another woman braids the hair of a friend sitting between her knees, her fingers moving fast and sure, weaving something that's half art, half ritual. And the children, every women's session had at least a few, scurry around like soap-slicked rabbits, laughing, shrieking, splashing. No one minds. Their noise belongs to this place, part of its generational hum. Farid, standing just behind you, leans in. Did you know, he whispers, that in some hammams, midwives performed checkups here, right in the steam rooms? You nod. Seems fitting, warm, private, full of women who know more than any doctor. He sighs. Do you think they'll let me back in if I wear a veil and really high voice? No. But no, Farid. One of the attendants notices your lingering presence and lifts an eyebrow. Not hostile, just informative. You get the message. With a final glance at the fragrant, glowing space beyond the curtain, you turn to leave. As you do, a peal of laughter erupts from within, loud, genuine, deliciously unfiltered. You can't help but smile. Whatever story was told, it's a good one. The women's hammam is more than a bathhouse. It's a theater, a classroom, a mother's lap, a dressing room, a rebellion. All of it, wrapped in steam and sandalwood. You walk back into the cooler air of the vestibule, the world outside slowly filtering back into your senses. Dust, sunlight, distant donkeys. It all feels a little too sharp after the softness of the hammam. You are respectful, quietly exhilarated, and forever a bit envious of bridal henna parties with complimentary foot scrubs. You step out into the bright stone corridor just off the atrium, blinking as the filtered light of late afternoon brushes your damp eyelashes. The warmth of the hammam still clings to your skin, a gentle afterglow that feels both internal and external. You breathe in, exhale, and notice something strange, an eerie hush broken only by a soft voice rising from one of the side chambers. Naturally, curiosity tugs at your towel. You drift toward the voice, barefoot steps making the faintest slaps against the floor. The chamber you find is modest, arched, with geometric windows casting honeycomb shadows on the walls, and occupied by a small circle of men seated cross-legged on a broad mat. The steam here is thinner, the light a little brighter, and the air tinged with the aroma of ink, wet parchment, and lingering peppermint oil. It's not a lounge, exactly. Not a private room, either. This, dear friend, is the scholar's corner. Every hammam has one, or at least every hammam worth its olives. A quiet space where thinkers retreat after their scrub to continue wrestling with the cosmos in slightly damp robes. Philosophers, poets, copyists, and the occasional wandering mystic. Notebooks are permitted, modesty cloths are recommended, but inconsistently applied. You sit near the edge, pretending not to eavesdrop. The man currently speaking is lanky, with the disheveled air of someone who has absolutely forgotten he is not in his study. He is quoting Aristotle in Greek from memory loudly. Across from him, a man with a salt-streaked beard shakes his head. No, the syllogism fails if the first premise is slippery, he mutters, dabbing sweat from his brow with a corner of his robe. To be fair, another interjects, most premises are slippery in here. Laughter circles the room like incense. This, clearly, is not a formal lecture. This is the post-bath brain stretch, where logic meets humidity and debates about the nature of time are occasionally interrupted by a misplaced sandal or someone spilling their rose water. And, oh, the things they discuss. Does the steam room represent the soul's longing for purification? If time is infinite, can you ever actually finish your bath? Would Plato have approved of underarm oil? It's equal parts ridiculous and revelatory. They drift between languages, Arabic, Persian, bits of Syriac, each phrase curling through the warm air like a vine searching for support. You watch as a younger man scribbles on a wax tablet, steam fogging the edges of his script. He nods occasionally, clearly understanding half of what's said and pretending to understand the rest. We've all been there. What's remarkable is not just the depth of thought, but the setting. Here, stripped of turbans, outer garments, and daily pretensions, everyone's equal. No formalities, no court titles, just minds in motion and bodies still glistening from eucalyptus-infused sweat. Historians still argue whether these hammam salons were spontaneous or unofficially organized. Some claim specific bathhouses became known as thinking hubs, where prominent scholars gathered weekly. Others suggest it was just a happy accident. Smart people like heat, and smart people like arguing. Combine the two, and voila, warm philosophy. One apocryphal story, often whispered between steam puffs, tells of a famed mathematician who had his greatest insight while being scrubbed with a loofah. Something about parabolae and calluses. No one's sure if it's true, but it's comforting to think that some of the Abbasid era's greatest innovations were born not in a dusty library, but in a towel. Farid appears behind you, sipping something from a clay cup. Ah, he says, glancing at the scholars. The sweat-stained sages return. You ever join them? You ask. Once, he replies. Quoted Rumi out of context and got rinsed with philosophical ridicule. Never again. Another burst of laughter erupts from the circle. The Aristotle-quoting fellow is now gesturing with his sandal, explaining the structure of the heavens as though mapping constellations in mid-air. You wonder if this is what true intellectual freedom looks like. No podium, no judgment, just semi-nude minds at play. One of the scholars catches your gaze and beckons you over. You decline with a polite shake of the head. You're a listener today, not a debater. And also, frankly, your towel is not securely fastened enough for celestial geometry. Still, you marvel at how natural it all feels. In the Abbasid world, learning was not confined to classrooms or courts. It slipped into every corner of life: bookshops, mosques, tea houses, and yes, even the bathhouse, especially the bathhouse. Because here, your body is soft, your defense is low, your mind pliable. Ideas float easier when you're clean, when the world's grime has been rinsed off, and the only thing left is curiosity wrapped in cotton. And maybe that's the real charm of the Scholar's Corner. It's not about proving anything. It's about sharing space, mental and physical, with other humans who are just trying to understand the universe without getting soap in their eye. The bearded man finishes his counterpoint with a smug nod, and the group dissolves into a new debate about whether the steam gods would favor logic or poetry. You rise quietly, leaving them to it. As you return to the larger chamber, the sounds of regular bathhouse life return, splashing, chuckling, the distant ring of copper on stone. But in your ears, the echo of a quote lingers. The soul is heated with reason and cooled with water. You are relaxed, slightly wiser, and mentally drafting your first scroll titled Epistemology in a Towel. You step back into the main corridor, now noticeably quieter, the echoes of philosophical debate receding like the tail end of a dream. A young boy passes you, carrying a bundle of towels nearly his height. He gives you a half bow, the kind reserved for people who probably won't tip, but also probably won't complain. You smile back, and then you hear it, the phrase that shifts the entire atmosphere of the hammam. Have you heard about the new cases? It's spoken in a low voice, barely louder than a sigh, but in a bathhouse, even whispers travel like mist. Within moments, shoulders tense, conversations hush, and steam seems to thicken with worry. Plague, not a full outbreak, not yet, just rumors. A few unexplained deaths in a distant district, a traveler coughing too hard, a scholar who left the hammam feverish and didn't return. All vague, unconfirmed, but in a city as large and interconnected as Baghdad, whispers like these travel faster than any caravan. You settle onto a stone bench, instinctively placing more space between you and the others now, and begin noticing things you hadn't before. How damp that cloth looks. How that man over there has been in the same seat for quite a while. How close the water bowls sit to one another. You're not paranoid, just aware. This isn't the first time the hammam has been a character in the story of disease. In fact, it's often played dual roles, hero and villain. On one hand, a place of cleansing and health, promoted by physicians and beloved by people of all ranks. On the other, a perfect storm of warm moisture, shared surfaces, and communal buckets. The petri dish of paradise. You recall that during the great flare of illness a generation ago, several bathhouses temporarily closed. Others reduced hours, rearranged benches for more space, and posted attendants at the door with vinegar-soaked cloths to dab guests' hands as a form of sterilization. Whether it worked or not is anyone's guess, but it made people feel better. Historians still argue whether hammams helped control the spread of plagues or exacerbated them. Some claim that the regular bathing routines and hot temperatures helped mitigate disease transmission. Others insist that all it took was one sick patron to turn a bathhouse into a public health catastrophe. It didn't help that no one wanted to stop going. The hammam was more than hygiene. It was community, warmth, routine. Asking people to avoid it was like asking them to stop eating bread. A pair of attendants walk by briskly, carrying a copper bowl of what smells like camphor and cloves. You know what that means. Cleansing ritual, a sort of spiritual disinfection. They'll sprinkle the scented water around the edges of the main chamber, muttering prayers and drawing invisible lines between safety and fate. You lean back as the camphor scent reaches you, sharp, bracing, vaguely medicinal. It's the ancient equivalent of hospital antiseptic, though it smells far more like something your grandmother would trust with your soul. A man seated nearby shifts uncomfortably. It's probably nothing, he says, too quickly. You nod. Probably. But everyone in the hammam is remembering stories, tales of fevers that arrived overnight, of baths abandoned mid-soak, of that one year the mosque and the hammam both closed, and the city fell silent except for the sound of coughing and prayer. One of the attendants speaks up now, not loudly, but clearly enough. Tomorrow's hours will be adjusted. There will be a limit of 10 men at a time. Bring your own towel. You sigh. There it is. Some grumble. A man mutters that he paid for a monthly pass. Another shrugs, already resigned. It's always like this. Illness comes with its own etiquette, just enough caution to avoid guilt, not enough to fully disrupt the illusion of control. You look down at your hands, still lightly perfumed from the last oiling, and wonder whether steam really does kill germs. The scholars upstairs would argue both sides until their towels fell off. Farid appears beside you again, holding a wet cloth to his forehead like he's auditioning for a tragic play. Well, he says, looks like I'll need a backup plan for my weekly detox. I suppose I could take up meditation. You already meditate, you remind him. You call it napping. He shrugs. Details. A boy walks through the chamber now, offering small packets of dried herbs, thyme, sage, and lavender. The folk cure trifecta. Some tuck it behind their ears, others crumble it into their hands and breathe deeply. One older man even sprinkles it into his sandal. Preventative foot wisdom, apparently. Despite the tension, there's a calm undercurrent too. The hammam has weathered illness before. It adapts. The people adapt. Maybe fewer patrons at a time, maybe a little more space between seats, maybe slightly less loofah sharing, but it won't shut down completely, not unless things get really bad. You realize now that the bathhouse isn't just a place to escape disease, it's where people come to face it, together, in towels, with herbs and good intentions. A group near the far end of the room begins a soft recitation of verses meant to protect against harm. Not formal prayer exactly, more like a lullaby against anxiety. The steam curls around the sound, and the chamber settles into a kind of uneasy peace. You stay a little longer, breathing in the camphor, feeling the heat soothe your nerves. You're not scared, not really, just watchful. Aware that even in a sanctuary of warmth, the world's chill can find its way in. You are clean, contemplative, and newly appreciative of your own towel. You wake from a half-doze, still seated against the stone bench, to the quiet murmur of voices rising from the atrium. The steam has begun to thin, curling more delicately now in the air, as if the hammam is exhaling after a long day. You feel not just clean, but hollowed out, emptied of tension, your body like a vase that has just been rinsed. But this moment of stillness brings with it a curious question. What about those who can't afford even this? You watch as a man rises across the room, slowly gathering his robe. His clothes are patched, his sandals held together by twine. His bath was quick, no oil, no towel, just water and one basin. He leaves silently, slipping out the way he came in, without ever quite meeting anyone's eye. Not everyone in Baghdad has the luxury of lingering, and yet this man was here. He bathed. He left cleaner than he came, which means someone made that possible. You stretch your legs and recall a concept you've heard in a dozen forms across the city. Waqf, charitable endowment, one of the quieter engines behind the Abbasid world's elegance, and one of the reasons why public bathhouses like this one, grand as they are, open their doors to the poorest residents of the city. A waqf was a kind of sacred trust, a donation of land, money, or property dedicated to a specific social good. A school, a fountain, a mosque, a hospital, and yes, bathhouses. Some philanthropists endowed entire hammams, naming them after their families, often stipulating in elegant calligraphy that a portion of revenue must cover the bath of those in need. Others simply left enough in their wills to keep the oil lamps lit or the towels washed. Historians believe this charitable infrastructure helped elevate the Abbasid cities into some of the most livable, equitable places in the medieval world. People who could not afford soap still bathed. People without homes still had warm water. You shift, remembering the small plaque you passed on your way in. It was easy to overlook, faded into the tilework near the door, written in a curly, half-vanished script. For the sake of the traveler, the widow, the tired, and the poor, This house of water shall remain open. You imagine the original donor, some long-dead merchant or minor vizier, setting aside coin for this purpose. Did he bathe here? Did he sneak in one final soak before his spirit departed for warmer realms? You smile because it wouldn't surprise you. Even within the complex social layers of the hammam, its whispered hierarchies and unspoken etiquette, there existed a kind of egalitarian spirit. The warm water didn't discriminate, and for many, the hammam was one of the few places where they could reclaim dignity. A father might come here after long hours at the market, his pockets near empty, and still find himself greeted with warm water and kind silence. A widow might arrive with her daughters, a small bundle of towels wrapped in a faded sheet, and leave with henna-stained hands and skin perfumed with clove oil. A laborer, aching and exhausted, could lean back into the hot stone and forget, if only for an hour, the weight of the world. You walk now toward a quieter chamber near the outer edge of the hammam, a section less ornate, simpler in design. No mosaic tiles, no perfumed oils, just clean benches, a trickle of water, and a few attendants who move like ghosts, fast, efficient, invisible. This is the section funded by charity. It's more functional than beautiful, and yet the steam still swirls here. The warmth is real, the care unmistakable. A boy sits on a stone step, his knees hugged to his chest, a faint bruise on his arm, and an expression older than his years. An attendant gently pours water over his shoulders, humming something soft and wordless. The boy doesn't speak, just breathes, his eyes closed. Safe. You stay only a moment, not wishing to intrude, but the image etches itself into your mind, because this quiet corner of the hammam, this simple moment of warmth offered without cost, is perhaps the most powerful part of the entire place. Farid once said, "You can judge a society by how it treats its smelliest citizens." He meant it as a joke, mostly. But standing here, barefoot and damp, you understand something deeper. In a world divided by class, creed, and coin, the hammam is a soft rebellion, a space where even the poor have a right to comfort, to cleanliness, to being touched gently by warm water. There are, of course, limitations. Not every hammam maintained these spaces with equal diligence. Some let the charity rooms fall into disrepair. Others turned away patrons too ragged to pay the base fee. Human generosity waxes and wanes, like anything else. Still, the infrastructure was there, the impulse to care for strangers, to endow beauty, not just utility. Even the worn-out soap trays and cracked tiles hold a kind of reverence. You return to the central chamber, heart a little heavier, skin still glowing. Someone offers you a glass of warm milk infused with cardamom and dates. You accept, sipping slowly, the sweetness comforting. The man who couldn't afford oil, he left with a clean face and warm feet. You think of him now, threading through the streets of Baghdad, leaving faint, wet footprints that will vanish before anyone can follow. But for a little while, he had warmth. You are thoughtful, moved, and more grateful than ever for the invisible hands that keep the water flowing. By now, the hammam feels like a second skin, humid, flickering, and gently buzzing with life. You move without thinking, slipping from chamber to chamber, nodding to familiar faces, exchanging soft smiles with strangers. The world outside, noisy, dusty, full of carts and contracts, fades with every echoing footstep. But this time, instead of turning toward the cooling rooms or the drying alcove, you follow a marble corridor that curves off behind a discreet curtain trimmed in gold thread. An attendant stands nearby, his robe noticeably cleaner, his stance more upright. He doesn't stop you, but he does give you a look, the kind that says, "You'd better be expected. You are not." But Farid is beside you, and Farid, like a particularly well-connected soap bubble, seems to glide through barriers with a wink and a poetic excuse. "We're just observing," he whispers, brushing past the curtain like it's merely the flap to a market stall. "For research." You both enter a space that might as well be another world entirely. The light is dimmer, the air thicker with the scent of oud and orange blossom. The tiles underfoot are smoother, warmer, and arranged in such an intricate geometric pattern that you instinctively slow your steps, afraid to disturb the harmony. You've entered the private suite, the caliph's personal hammam, or at least one modeled after it, reserved for nobles, viziers, favored poets, and other members of Baghdad's perfumed elite. This isn't just a bath. This is a curated experience. The room is wide, but not ostentatious. Instead, it whispers luxury with every detail: polished onyx basins, brass taps shaped like swans, towels folded in the shape of birds, and oils so fragrant your nostrils tingle in anticipation. In the far corner, two men recline on divans, sipping cool infusions and discussing something about Syrian citrus trade routes. One wears a robe threaded with real gold. The other has a thumb ring carved from lapis lazuli, which seems excessive but is probably a family heirloom. The attendant approaches and bows slightly. Would the gentleman care for a seated steam or a lying down rinse? You blink. Lying down, rinse? Farid steps in smoothly. No service, just passing through. We're poets. The attendant's eyes light up. Ah, then you'll want the West Chamber. There's better acoustics. You don't know what that means, and you're afraid to ask. But your attention is already drifting toward the central pool, a shallow basin surrounded by marble lions, each one spouting water that's either been gently warmed by sunlight or blessed by someone very persuasive. The surface of the water is smooth as glass. No one swims. You suspect doing so would be a scandal. Historians still argue over the existence of caliphal hammams inside the palaces. Some insist they were real and elaborate, perfumed chambers with gilded ceilings and silver-inlaid stone. Others believe they were smaller, simpler, more symbolic than functional. But everyone agrees, if anyone in the Abbasid court wanted a bath, they got it, and not just any bath. Attendants wore special robes. Oils were imported from India. The water temperature was adjusted to within a degree of perfection. One account holds of a caliph who insisted on being rinsed with snowmelt from the Zagros mountains. Another swore only by rainwater collected during the first full moon of spring. Excess, absolutely. But in an empire that measured beauty in calligraphy and bathed its poetry in metaphors, it fits. You and Farid pass through the suite, trying not to look too provincial. A servant passes carrying a tray of candied ginger. Another sets down a scroll with the day's bath menu, featuring scented rinses, scrub intensities, and even suggested reading pairings. "I think I just saw a bath library," you whisper. Farid nods. "You did." "There's a poetry corner near the oil warmer. Don't sit there. It's reserved." You pause by an alcove where a young boy gently massages an older man's scalp with what looks like warmed pomegranate oil. The man hums contentedly, eyes closed. A copper bell chimes nearby, some sort of signal. Another attendant enters with a fresh towel folded into a lotus. It's all so serene, like the rest of the hammam, but softened, distilled. No gossip, no slapstick foot scrubbing, just quiet wealth soaking itself to perfection. And you understand the appeal. Here, the hammam becomes not just a place to clean the body, but to elevate it, to remind the bather that he is someone worth the effort, that the world can be shaped, at least in this chamber, into order and comfort. You wonder, briefly, what the Caliph would have thought, lying here under domes painted with stars, eyes closed, letting the water lull him into forgetfulness. Did he plan conquests in this very tub? Did he dream of peace? Did he fall asleep mid-oil rub and drool on a silk pillow? Farid nudges you. "We should go before someone realizes we're not meant to be here." You nod. One last glance at the lions, the lapis rings, the poetry towels, then back through the curtain where the air smells less expensive but more familiar. You step into the main hall again, feeling slightly more royal but no richer. You are dazzled, towel-clad, and now dreaming of your own scented bath library. You're back in the main chamber now, slightly flushed and perhaps a bit too aware of how humble your own towel looks compared to the gilded glories of the Caliphate suite. Farid, to his credit, is acting like nothing happened, which probably means he's already composing a poem titled Reflections on a Lapis Thumb Ring. The steam has mellowed into a soft fog, no longer rising in great clouds, but lingering near the floor like a shy cat. You take a seat once again near a small basin, letting your thoughts and ego cool off. Around you, the bathhouse carries on. The rhythm, the flow, the splash of water, the quiet conversations, all unchanged. You could visit 100 times and never quite have the same experience, but some things always remain, which brings you, at last, to one of the most underrated aspects of the Abbasid hammam: etiquette, not the strict, finger-wagging kind. There are no signs here reading "no cannonballs" or "silence, please." But there is a rhythm, a culture, and yes, a code. One you learn not from a scroll, but from watching, and from being watched. Because let's be honest, someone is always watching. Not out of suspicion, necessarily, but because communal bathing requires this of the delicate balance between awareness and selective blindness. Take, for instance, where you sit. It seems simple. Just pick a bench, right? Wrong. There's a hierarchy of benches. The ones near the warm water basin are usually reserved for elders or the most regular patrons. Newcomers take the outer edges. Sit in the wrong spot, and someone might gently suggest that your usual place looks cooler today. Then there's the matter of greetings. You don't barge into a chamber with a booming, "Peace be upon you," like a market crier. Here, greetings are soft, short, and respectful. A nod. May your soak be gentle. Anything more, and you're flirting with faux pas. Modesty, too, has its unspoken rules. Yes, everyone's half naked, but there's an art to it. How you wrap your towel, how you walk, how you sit. No one stares. No one preens. There is a kind of dignified invisibility that everyone performs together. Farid once told you about the time a visiting merchant from Samarkand wore a full robe into the steam room. He sweat through it within minutes, passed out, and had to be revived with a cold fig and an even colder scolding. Then there's loofah etiquette. You don't borrow someone else's, ever. Not even if it's the good kind, the hand-woven type from Syria that smells faintly of dried mint. And if you accidentally use someone's oil, apologize like you've just insulted their grandmother's embroidery. Sharing is encouraged, but so is discretion. For example, if you're pouring water over someone's back, you don't just splash. There's a technique, 3 slow pours, even rhythm, with a gentle, ready, in between. Otherwise, you'll be known forever as the guy who waterboarded Uncle Malik. Also, silence is golden in the hot room. That's where people meditate, nap, or rehearse long grudges. Save your political theories for the cool chamber, preferably while sipping mint water and frowning thoughtfully. One of the slipperier points of etiquette is gossip. It happens. Of course it does. The hammam is where rumors are born, raised, and occasionally dunked in cold water. But there's a code. No names, no accusations, and absolutely no gossip about someone who is currently in the room. Especially if they're scrubbing their feet near the door, they're always listening. You shift slightly, letting the warm stone behind you soothe your shoulders, and think about how much this shared choreography matters. The bathhouse isn't chaos. It's a play. Everyone has a role. The silent soaker, the loud storyteller, the quiet dozer, the man who always brings oranges, the old woman who mutters blessings into her soap. Even the sounds are regulated. Loud laughter is fine, sometimes. Yelling, no, sneezing must be followed by a blessing, and any kind of singing. Allowed only if your voice is decent, or you're over the age of 60 and no one has the heart to stop you. You once heard a man sing verses from the Mu'allaqat so beautifully that 2 strangers tipped him in rosewater. The same day, a boy tried chanting the lyrics of a popular tavern song and was politely escorted to the rinse chamber until he found a better melody. The point is not to create uniformity, but to maintain flow. The hammam breathes better when its people move gently, listen more than they speak, and remember that everyone is here to leave the world outside, even for just an hour. Farid returns from wherever he wandered and plops down beside you, managing to sit with the exact amount of space that signals friendship without foot contact. Did you know, he says, that in one hammam, a man was asked to leave for humming off key while scrubbing? I believe it, you say. Etiquette is a dance, he intones, reaching for a towel, and we are all clumsy partners. Speak for yourself, you mutter, wrapping your towel like a toga. An old man near the basin clears his throat. You both fall quiet. That's another rule. When the elders are preparing for their final rinse, younger bathers hush. It's respect. It's rhythm. You lie back now, your body so familiar with the space that you could close your eyes and still reach the nearest water bowl without spilling a drop. You are calm, coordinated, and deeply respectful of the sacred geometry of towel placement. The steam curls gently toward the ceiling, wrapping itself around the ribbed dome like a lazy dragon settling in for a nap. You lie there, breathing in the thick herbal air, letting your limbs feel delightfully useless. The sound of distant trickling water, a soft cough, a splash. Each echo reverberates like a drum underwater, but then a new sound, subtler, quieter, the kind that makes ears perk before minds catch up. Two voices, speaking too softly and too quickly to be casual. You open one eye. In the far alcove of the cool chamber, partly obscured by a decorative screen carved with palm leaves, two men are hunched close together. Their towels are too neat, their hands too still, and though their posture screams, "Nothing to see here," your inner storyteller knows better. Ah, the secret meeting. Not every visit to the hammam is just about oil and exfoliation. Sometimes the bathhouse becomes a place of quiet arrangements, whispered contracts, or tension-laced truce talks. Because we're better to discuss delicate matters than in a place where people are half naked, deeply relaxed, and unlikely to be carrying weapons. Farid appears again, as if summoned by the scent of intrigue. He follows your gaze and grins. Steam diplomacy, he murmurs. The quietest kind. You've heard stories, of course. The hammam has long been the secret theater of Baghdad's social negotiations. Some say merchants brokered grain deals between scrubs. Scholars say treaties were drafted between rinses. And every hammam regular knows the tale of the disgraced tax collector who used the bathhouse's echo chamber to convince a rival scribe to rewrite a royal report, purely out of spite and lemon-scented persuasion. Historians still argue whether these steam-borne negotiations carried any real political weight. Were they informal extensions of court debates, or just a good excuse for rivals to insult each other while pretending to compliment their towel-folding skills? It's unclear, but one thing is certain. A towel-clad conversation carries a certain honesty. After all, it's hard to lie convincingly when you're dripping. You shift slightly, adjusting your seating for better eavesdropping. Not that you would, of course, but if one happened to overhear. The two men speak in clipped tones. One gestures to his hand, rubbing two fingers together. Money, maybe. The other scratches his beard thoughtfully, then glances around the room. His gaze brushes past you, but doesn't pause. He doesn't suspect. You lean back and pretend to examine your toenails. A classic move. Fareed whispers, I bet it's about the grain routes, or saffron taxation, or smuggling ostrich feathers. You raise an eyebrow. Ostrich feathers? Don't laugh, he huffs. There's a fortune in feather quills. Poets are picky. You stifle a grin. But the truth is, almost anything could be under discussion. In an empire as vast and cosmopolitan as the Abbasid Caliphate, the hammam was the one place where provincial governors might sit beside court clerks, where traveling merchants might end up elbow to elbow with poets, physicians, or even spies. And yes, spies. Bathhouse lore is full of tales involving secret informants. A towel left folded just so could signal an agreement. A misplaced sandal might mean a meeting point. One apocryphal story involves a servant who leaked court secrets via loofah embroidery. Was it real? No idea. But it's an embroidered loofah, so of course the story endures. You sip from a small clay cup of warm fennel tea, its licorice tang grounding you as the two men stand abruptly. Their conversation ends as if sliced. One adjusts his towel, the other dips his hands into a basin as if to make the whole thing look routine. They part without another word, heading in opposite directions. Fareed stares after them, then leans close. See the taller one? You nod. That's Akram, the soap trader with suspiciously stable prices. You raise both brows. Suspiciously stable? He never raises them, Fareed hisses, like he's reporting a cardinal sin. In this economy, impossible. You try not to snort fennel tea out your nose. But as you settle again into the bench's embrace, the ripple of that quiet meeting continues. Because even if nothing concrete was exchanged, no coins, no contracts, the fact that they met here, of all places, is telling. Bathhouses strip away armor, both literal and social. There's no flurry of robes to hide behind, no jeweled turban to declare status, no courtly entourage, just warm stone, soft towels, and two human beings talking like their words could evaporate with the next gust of steam. And maybe that's what makes the hammam such fertile ground for diplomacy, its ephemeral quality. Nothing lingers here. Secrets whispered under a copper spout are carried off by the mist. Promises made between rinses can be denied with a shrug. Oh, that? I must have been light-headed. You know how the eucalyptus gets me. You stretch out once more, watching as the taller man, Akram of the suspicious soap prices, exits the chamber without so much as a backward glance. The other stays behind, lounging now, as if to prove there was nothing unusual about their meeting. It's oddly satisfying, the idea that the bathhouse isn't just for the body, but for the wheels of commerce, alliances, and petty vendettas, that somewhere between soap and slippers, the fate of a caravan or a marriage might be decided. Fareed lies back beside you, hands folded behind his head. You think they were plotting, you ask? I think, he says, closing his eyes, that he's about to raise prices. I'm switching to apricot oil before the rush. You chuckle, letting your thoughts drift upward with the rising mist. You are sharp-eyed, towel-wrapped, and now mildly obsessed with the politics of soap. You're half certain you're hallucinating when you hear it. A kind of splashing, a little too loud, a little too rhythmic, followed by a grunt, then another splash, and unmistakably, a wet snort. You sit up slowly. This is not human bathhouse behavior, at least not human bathhouse behavior at this volume, and then you hear someone mutter, half laughing, "She hates the cold rinse every time." Fareed, who's been lightly dozing beside you, cracks one eye open. "Oh no," he murmurs, "they brought the elephant again." You blink. The what now? He's already standing, wrapping his towel tight and motioning for you to follow. You rise, stretching slightly, and shuffle toward the southern annex of the hammam, a section you've never had occasion to explore, partly because it's usually locked, and partly because nothing good ever starts with the sentence, "They brought the elephant again." As you round the final bend, the temperature drops slightly. The steam is thinner here, replaced with a kind of damp haze. You hear water sloshing and low voices, deep ones, reverent ones. And then you see her. Well, not all of her at once. She's too large for that. But you see the ear first, enormous and gently flapping, trailing a bead of water, then the trunk, lazily curling around a bucket, which it promptly dumps back into a shallow marble pool with majestic apathy. A full-grown, actual elephant. Standing, damp and mildly irritated, in what is essentially a very fancy animal spa. Fareed leans in. "This," he says, "is Salma. She belongs to one of the caliph's cousins, or maybe a regional emir. No one knows, but when she gets too itchy from the dust, they bring her here." You stare, and no one objects. Fareed shrugs. She tips well. Salma lifts one foot, places it daintily into the basin, and lets out a great huff of breath that smells like old hay and pride. Nearby, two attendants work in perfect sync, scrubbing her legs, rinsing her sides, murmuring soothing words like she's a fussy duchess rather than a half-ton herbivore, and she loves it, or, at the very least, tolerates it with regal stoicism. The Abbasid Caliphate, for all its urban sprawl and scholarly sparkle, also had a surprising number of animals in high places. Royal menageries were common, collections of exotic creatures brought from across the empire. Tigers from the east, parrots from Africa, snow leopards, desert foxes, even the occasional overly confident goose. But elephants, those were rare, expensive, impressive, and considered a mark of serious prestige. Salma, it seems, is one of these chosen few, and occasionally, like today, she receives a full spa treatment, complete with lemon peel scrub and aloe rinse. The logistics alone are staggering. The hammam had to reinforce this section's flooring decades ago after a near-catastrophic slipping incident involving a particularly energetic hippo. Since then, only select bathhouses are deemed suitable for animal clients. Salma dunks her trunk again, this time gently splashing one of the attendants. He doesn't flinch, just chuckles and continues rinsing her flank with a bucket the size of a small boat. You marvel at the care, the coordination, the quiet respect. This isn't a spectacle, it's a ritual. The same dignity offered to human bathers, extended with minor modifications to a creature who could squash you like a sesame seed. And she's not alone either. In the far corner, tethered loosely to a decorative column, stands a warhorse, sleek, dark-eyed, mane braided with tiny glass beads. A boy is brushing her legs with a tool that looks suspiciously like a loofah. The horse doesn't fidget, just stands there, noble and damp, possibly re-evaluating her life choices. I'm told they rotate the animals, Farid says, as if giving a market report. Camels come in the morning, dogs, only the clean ones, on alternate Thursdays. Birds get a separate room, too many feathers in the drains. Why not just wash them at home, you ask, genuinely baffled. He shrugs. Some say the hammam's water is blessed. Others say it's vanity. But the truth is, have you ever tried to give an elephant a bath in a courtyard fountain? Fair enough, historians still debate how widespread these animal bathing traditions were. Some claim they were isolated to major cities like Baghdad or Damascus. Others insist they were common among wealthy households across the empire. What's clear is that the Abbasids, with their love of science, medicine, and creature comforts, viewed hygiene as a universal virtue, whether you had 2 legs or 4. A distant cousin of Farid once tried to open a hammam just for animals. He claimed parrots needed steam to improve their vocabulary. The business failed, but one of the parrots learned to say, "That's too expensive," which tells you everything. You stand quietly as Salma settles into the basin, her body half submerged, eyes half lidded in contentment. The air smells like damp straw and citrus oil. It shouldn't work, but somehow it's peaceful. One of the attendants offers you a towel, not for use, just for safety, in case she sneezes. You accept it with a grateful nod and step back. Because sometimes, even in a city of scholars and scribes, it's the image of a glistening elephant having a better skincare routine than you that stays with you longest. You are awestruck, unexpectedly fond of pachyderms, and deeply committed to not being out-pampered by livestock. After bidding a respectful farewell to Salma the spa elephant, who trumpets once in your direction, you and Farid retrace your steps back toward the central chambers of the hammam. The air thickens again with familiar scents, soap, lemon oil, and now a subtle undercurrent of something muskier, earthier. You pause, catching a whiff that isn't quite sandalwood, not quite eucalyptus, something floral and a little unsettling. Do you smell that? You ask. Farid sniffs theatrically. Ah, that, my friend, is the scent of fear. You arch an eyebrow. Or possibly night-blooming jasmine mixed with frankincense, which can only mean one thing. He turns with a dramatic sweep of his towel cloak and points toward a curtained alcove at the edge of the rinsing room. The spirits are near. You stare at him. He grins. It's the jinn room. Of course it is. You've heard the stories, of course. Everyone has. Hammams, like wells, crossroads, and old fig trees, are favorite haunts of the jinn, those ancient, ambiguous spirits made of smokeless fire. Some help, some hinder. All tend to have opinions about soap, And though most bathers would deny it with a scoff in daylight, everyone has one hammam story they won't tell until dusk, when the sky glows red and the drains start making suspicious gurgling noises. You follow Farid, of course, because what else can you do? The alcove is quiet, dimly lit. A single oil lamp flickers in a carved niche, its flame wobbling like it's unsure of its own reality. The air is cooler here and heavier, somehow. The steam doesn't curl upward. It lingers low, hugging the floor like it's afraid of heights. A few bathers sit in silence, spaced evenly along the curved wall. No one speaks. No one splashes. One man holds a small bundle of dried herbs in his lap, rue, maybe, or wormwood, known for keeping mischievous spirits at bay. You and Farid sit quietly. Your skin, still warm from the elephant annex, prickles slightly. And then Farid, in a voice barely above a whisper, begins telling one of the old stories. Long ago, he murmurs, when this bathhouse was new and the grout hadn't yet dried, a jinn named Barzook made his home beneath the hot stone slab in the steam chamber. You look at the slab. Suddenly, it seems a little too perfect in shape. They say, Farid continues, he would hum along to Quranic recitations, but always slightly off key, just enough to unsettle the imam. You snort. He once rearranged all the towels alphabetically. No one noticed until an entire week passed without towel-related conflict. That's when people grew suspicious. You shake your head, but still, your fingers tighten slightly around your towel. Truth be told, belief in jinn and other unseen entities was not a fringe idea in the Abbasid world. Even the most learned scholars kept amulets tucked into their robes. Philosophers like Al-Jahiz and Al-Ghazali wrote treatises acknowledging jinn, sometimes cautiously, sometimes with the literary equivalent of a shrug. One hammam in Basra famously had a stone basin inscribed with the phrase, "Not for jinn, try the next bathhouse." It didn't help. The jinn apparently appreciated the humor and stayed anyway. Stories abound. Towels disappearing and reappearing, knotted into complex knots no human hands could manage. Soap melting without heat, lamps flickering to the rhythm of a whispered prayer. And once, according to Farid at least, a jinn took possession of a merchant's parrot and taught it to recite heretical poetry. You sit back against the warm stone and listen as the room creaks faintly. The drain gurgles, the oil lamp flickers again, and someone sighs. You turn to look. An old woman, wrapped tightly in 2 towels, sits on the far bench, eyes closed. She mutters softly in a language you don't recognize. Her hands move over a string of small, dark beads. Date pits, you think. An improvised rosary. Is she praying for peace or for protection? Beside her, an attendant sets down a small bowl of salt water. Another drops in a twist of sage and lights it with a whisper of fire. Smoke coils lazily around the alcove. Not cleansing, not religious, just traditional. Bathhouse superstition is less about fear and more about respect. Jinn aren't necessarily evil, but they are particular, and no one wants to be the one who offended them by sitting in their favorite corner or using their preferred loofah. Farid whispers again. They say if the steam rises straight upward, the jinn are asleep, but if it spirals, they're watching. You glance up. Spiral, of course. Still, you're not afraid. Not really. The jinn stories are half warning, half comfort. They remind you that the hammam, for all its brick and brass, is older than just architecture. It lives, it breathes, it remembers, and somewhere beneath the floor, perhaps something remembers you too. You rise slowly, not wishing to disturb whatever truce exists in this room. As you and Farid return to the main hall, the air shifts again. Lighter, warmer, filled with voices and life. Do you believe in jinn? You ask. Farid shrugs. I believe in clean floors, folded towels, and not whistling after dark. Fair enough. You are amused, lightly spooked, and deeply respectful of all unseen bathhouse roommates. Back in the main hall, the steam feels warmer again, familiar, almost grounding after your eerie little detour. The light has softened into that golden haze that comes just before sunset, when even the tile glints sleepily. You stretch your arms, your joints making satisfying pops, and realize you've been here a while. Time in the hammam is slippery. You come in for an hour and emerge, if you're not careful, with a beard a few inches longer and a fresh perspective on taxation. Farid is already talking to someone new, of course, a merchant with sun-browned skin and fingers ringed in copper. You catch a few words: turfin, cinnamon, Byzantine wine vessels. Clearly, this isn't your average grocery run. You settle beside them, and the merchant gives you a nod of acknowledgement, the universal "you're clean enough to sit here" gesture. It doesn't take long before the conversation drifts exactly where you hoped it would, the bathhouse as crossroads. Because the hammam isn't just a place for locals, it's where the wider world leaks in. You hear stories before they reach the bazaar, long before they trickle into court poetry or official decrees. The merchant, Mahir, he says, has come from Nishapur by way of Isfahan, Damascus, and a suspiciously long detour through Samara. He's bathed in at least 10 different hammams in as many cities, and each one, he claims, tells you more about a place than its governor's court ever could. In Nishapur, Mahir says, scooping water over his knees, the bath was tiled with black stone. No steam, only heat, silent, like sitting inside a patient volcano. Farid shudders. No steam, barbaric. In Damascus, Mahir continues, they poured olive oil in the cold rinse. It was like being hugged by a salad. He laughs, and so do you, but his point sticks. The bathhouse is a node, part spa, part market square, part embassy. Merchants come here after long desert treks, caravans heavy with silk, salt, lapis, and dreams. They trade coins, of course, but also gossip, ideas, and recipes. You once overheard a man from the Horn of Africa teaching a spice seller how to make tamarind soap. Another time, a woman from Sind demonstrated how to braid henna into a pattern so complex it had its own name, Moon's Echo. Historians often speak of the Silk Road, that great artery of exchange stretching from China to the Mediterranean. But too often, they forget that the stops along the way weren't just warehouses and way stations. They were hammams, where a traveler could wash the desert from their skin, where traders sealed deals in steam, where languages merged and drifted apart like condensation on warm stone. You've met men here whose tongues braided Arabic with Greek, Persian with Uyghur, and yet somehow everyone managed to agree on which oil smelled best. The hammam's side chambers often doubled as lounge spaces for these travelers. You pass one now, a small room with hanging lanterns and wide cushions where 4 men sit cross-legged, sipping from chipped cups and comparing calluses. One has a weathered scroll spread across his lap. Another points at a rote drawn in charcoal, the edges smudged by fingers and time. The mountain pass is snowed over, he says. The pass always snows, the other replies. You either wait or bribe the snow. There's no urgency in their voices. That comes later, in the streets. Here, even problems take a long, slow soak. Back in the main chamber, Mahir leans closer. You want to know the real reason I stop here every time I pass through Baghdad? You nod, expecting something poetic. They slice the cucumbers thinner than anywhere else. Farid gasps. You mean the ones in the cooling room? Mahir nods solemnly. Perfect. So thin, they float like edible feathers. You file that information away. It may never be useful, but it's the kind of detail that makes the world feel alive. And it's true, details matter. Hammams weren't identical. A traveler could spend days comparing the merits of the mosaic work in Cairo to the acoustics of the rinse rooms in Bukhara. Arguments have broken out over the ideal towel texture in Aleppo versus Basra. You once saw a man nearly faint when he discovered that the hammam in Tabriz didn't serve ginger tea. The bathhouse is both global and local, rooted in place, yet always opening its doors to what drifts in. Mahir stands, shaking off the water like a contented cat. I leave at dawn, he says. If the guards ask, you didn't hear me mention Samara. Farid winks. We never hear anything, except opinions about towel folding. Mahir departs, leaving a faint trail of rosewater and stories behind him. You lean back once again, eyes on the high ceiling where painted stars fade into the curved dome. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a child laugh, a bucket clatter, a splash of water that might be someone rinsing away 1,000 miles of dust. You are still, you are steamed, and you are at the exact, quiet center of the world. Farid drifts off in the direction of the fig platter he's been eyeing for half an hour, and you find yourself alone once again, though alone in the hammam is a relative term. You're surrounded by towel-clad men, mumbling about water temperature, old women chuckling softly behind the veil of steam, and the rhythmic clink of basins against stone. It's a symphony of gentle sounds, and you're the blissfully damp conductor. But something about Mahir's passing mention of Samara lingers in your thoughts, not for its possible intrigue, but because of its architectural reputation. Samara, like Baghdad, like Nishapur and Damascus, carried the Abbasid blueprint in its bones. And that blueprint included bathhouses. Your thoughts follow the water channels outward now, beyond this particular hammam, along the arteries of the empire. You start tracing the bathhouse's journey across the Abbasid world, how the concept moved, morphed, and embedded itself like a warm tile under 100 different skies. Because while the hammam may feel like a distinctly Baghdadi experience, it's not confined to this city. Oh no, it has spread, not just in stone and steam, but in custom, etiquette, and story. Take Damascus, for instance, a city older than most memories, its hammams nestled like pearls in the alleys of the old city. There, the bathhouses are filled with jasmine-scented steam and soft-voiced attendants who recite poetry while pouring water. You once met a man who claimed the best rub of his life happened in Hammam Nur al-Din. They used rose oil and politics, he said. You never found out what he meant. Or Cairo, where the hammams are less subdued, more boisterous, full of laughter and brass spigots shaped like crocodiles. The scrub-downs there are vigorous, verging on violent, depending on your luck, and the tea comes strong and sugared, served with a frown that means love. Farther east, in Nishapur, the bathhouses take on a more Persian character, domes lined with turquoise tiles, hot rooms perfumed with saffron and cardamom, and a silence so complete you'd think even the water was meditating. But it's not just major cities. Even smaller villages along the old caravan routes had their own versions of the hammam, modest, one-room affairs with clay basins and coals kept burning by a single sleepy boy. And somehow, they still followed the same pattern: heat, rinse, rest, repeat. Historians still argue whether this widespread architecture was state-driven or simply an organic outgrowth of Abbasid life. Some say caliphs issued decrees to standardize public baths. Others point to merchant guilds or regional governors taking initiative. Likely, it was both, empire and economy working together to ensure everyone could be exfoliated in comfort. There's something almost uncanny about it. You could wake up in a hammam in Cordoba, walk blindfolded through the steam, and find yourself correctly pouring water over your left shoulder first, using the fourth bowl, and not speaking until the third rinse. It's that consistent. The rituals travel even when the bricks don't, and the influence didn't stop at borders. Even as the Abbasid Caliphate shifted and shrank, the hammam persisted, carried into the Ottoman world, the Maghreb, even parts of Europe. The tiled warmth and flowing rhythm seeped into new cultures, adopted and adapted, like a song played in a new key. You once met a traveler from Andalusia who swore the hammams there had fountains that whispered the Quran if you listened closely. You didn't believe him, but you admired his commitment to ambiance. And it's not just the architecture, it's the habits. People who've never met, never spoken, still agree on how to fold a towel, when to be silent, and how many minutes of steam are acceptable before one begins hallucinating. You walk slowly now, trailing your fingers along the damp stone wall as you make your way toward the back chamber. A few artisans rest there, tile makers, blacksmiths, weavers. They lie in a circle, trading news from the western provinces. One mentions how the bathhouses in Kufa started offering rose petal rinses. Another scoffs. Too fancy. Give me vinegar and a proper scrub. A young boy speaks up. I heard in Delhi they bathe with milk. Farid reappears, a fig in each hand. Milk spoils. Never trusted anyone whose bath can curdle. The circle laughs. The boy grins. You settle in beside them, folding your legs beneath you and leaning back on your palms. The walls here are painted in faded vines and birds, the remnants of some forgotten artisan's brief flirtation with mural art. One sparrow still looks relatively lively. The others have flown into the haze of memory, and as you sit there, it strikes you. The hammam doesn't just spread across cities and empires, it moves through generations. The boy with big ears and mismatched sandals might grow into the old man who hums while scrubbing. The traveler with a scroll might return with a tale of distant baths in cities whose names you can't yet pronounce. And you, yes, even you, might one day show a new guest how to hold a bowl without spilling half of it on your knees. That's how traditions live, not just in buildings, but in backs scrubbed and stories swapped. You stretch your arms overhead, bones cracking in 3 distinct languages, and sigh. You are connected, cross-culturally moisturized, and quietly plotting your next hammam-based vacation. You lie back on the warm, polished bench, letting the heat do its ancient work, loosening what's tight, smoothing what's frayed, gently unknotting the spools of thought in your skull. Around you, the hammam moves in its familiar rhythm, the splash of copper basins, the shuffle of wet slippers, the low murmur of water and voices. But just as you begin to drift, somewhere between memory and nap, a loud clang rings out near the front of the chamber. You and a dozen others startle just slightly. One man gasps dramatically, clutching his towel like a curtain in a play. Farid, of course, is already smirking. Ah, he says. The law has entered the room. The attendant who caused the clang is now straightening a brass bell that hangs from the entrance arch. He mutters under his breath and scowls at a boy trailing behind him with a towel wrapped more like a cape than a proper covering. You sit up, curious, because the hammam may feel like a land of steam and serenity, but make no mistake, there are rules, lots of them, some written, most not. And once in a while, they must be enforced. Bathhouse law, you see, is a peculiar blend of civic statute, religious guidance, tradition, and an ancient sense of personal space. And it's more serious than you'd expect for a place where everyone's in sandals. You watch now as the head steward, Idris again, towel precisely folded, sandals spotless, steps forward and addresses the room in his sandpaper baritone. This is a place of rest, he announces, not looking at anyone in particular, not theater, not acrobatics, and certainly not, he pauses, eyes falling on the boy still flapping his towel like a triumphant falcon, a stage for juvenile experiments in towel aerodynamics. A few chuckles ripple through the room. The boy reddens. The cape becomes a toga, dignity restored. And yet, beneath the gentle scolding lies something essential. The hammam only works because of its structure, its unspoken agreements, and when someone violates those, the experience unravels. So there are laws. Written ones, posted at the entrance, sometimes even carved in marble. These include hours of entry and gender separation, appropriate behavior during religious observances, maximum occupancy per chamber, no bringing animals, though Salma the elephant clearly has diplomatic immunity, and of course, do not disturb the jinn. That one is more decorative than enforceable, but you never know. Then there are the unwritten laws, the ones everyone knows, but no one tells you directly. You learn them by making mistakes. For example, never sit in someone else's usual spot. Even if it's unmarked, even if it looks perfectly empty, that corner bench might belong to an elder who's been scrubbing his knees there since the Caliph was a child. Also, no singing unless you're over 70 or blessed with a voice like warm honey. And don't quote Rumi unless you actually understand what he meant. The hammam has no room for poetic impostors. And the towel rules, oh, the towel rules, they must be wrapped high enough to suggest modesty, but low enough to allow for actual bathing. You may not use someone else's towel, not even by mistake. If you drop your towel, you pick it up quickly and with grace. There is no shame, only lessons. You remember one poor fellow who tried to fold his towel into a complicated triangle. It unfurled mid-stretch. He left a changed man. Historians still debate how strictly these rules were enforced. Some claim there were hammam-specific officers appointed by the city to patrol cleanliness, behavior, and loitering. Others argue that enforcement was largely community-driven, maintained through side eyes, muttered disapproval, and, occasionally, a well-placed bucket of cold water. But there's no doubt the law existed in its own damp and fragrant way, because for the hammam to function, order was essential, and so were boundaries. Idris now turns to address a man reclining a bit too horizontally near the central pool. "Sir," he says gently, "we sleep here only after the final rinse." The man nods, sheepishly adjusting his posture from collapsed lizard to thoughtful philosopher. Farid leans over and whispers, "There's also a law about bringing dates into the hot room. Too sticky. People used to lose molars." "Is that real?" you ask. "I made it up just now, but doesn't it feel true?" "Honestly, yes." You lie back again, arms folded behind your head, marveling at how law here doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like preservation. A quiet, towel-scented social contract. And when laws are broken, punishment is rarely harsh. It's measured. A pointed cough, a gentle redirection, a slipper tossed with impeccable accuracy. But some offenses do invite more serious responses. Once, Farid tells you, a man snuck into the women's session in another bathhouse. He was discovered and promptly scrubbed within an inch of his pride. then paraded out wearing only fig leaves and shame. The punishment was theatrical, but unforgettable. Another time, a wealthy merchant tried to bribe an attendant for exclusive use of the main chamber. The story goes that the attendant took the money and then used it to fund free bath days for a month. The merchant was quietly asked to scrub his own back, which in this society was about as humiliating as it got. The rules here aren't about control, they're about collective comfort. They ensure everyone gets to unwind, rinse, think, argue, even nap, without the fear of disruption. Because in a world that spins too fast, where the outside air is often filled with dust and decree, the hammam remains one of the few places where everyone agrees to a certain peace. A warmth, a shared decency. You glance up again at the brass bell. It's still crooked, but now it feels intentional. A reminder that even in a place of order, a little imperfection is welcome. You are obedient, rule-abiding, and finally confident enough in your towel fold to pass inspection. It begins with a drip, a single, sharp splash echoing across stone, followed by a louder splash, then a short yell, and just like that, the tranquility of the hammam shifts into something else entirely, a gentle chaos that rolls in like a wet rug down a marble corridor. You sit upright, alert, not alarmed. There's no screaming or fire, just murmurs, movement, and the unmistakable sound of someone muttering prayers near a drain. Farid walks past you, his towel slung over one shoulder like a seasoned general surveying the battlefield. "It's the pipes," he says. Again. And so begins what bathhouse veterans know intimately and dread reflexively, a full-blown plumbing episode. This one starts in the northeast rinse chamber, a blockage, likely, something unholy lodged in the drain. Perhaps a ball of hair the size of a pigeon, or a bar of soap too luxurious to melt properly, or, as some suspect, the jinn playing practical jokes again. Regardless, the outcome is immediate. Water begins pooling at ankle level, creeping outward like a hungry tide. Patrons scatter, not frantically, but with theatrical exasperation. Towels are gathered, slippers are slapped into motion, and a chorus of complaints begins in at least 5 dialects. You grab your things, relocating to the central chamber, where the attendants have begun laying down woven mats and muttering about the last time, which involved a broken pipe, a flooded massage room, and an elderly calligrapher who drifted halfway out the door on a wooden basin. Despite the inconvenience, no one's angry. Hammam mishaps are like sudden rainstorms in spring, annoying, but not uncommon, and sometimes oddly refreshing. You sip a fresh glass of warm mint water and observe the operation unfold. First, the bathhouse engineer arrives, a man named Yusuf, who wears a robe that looks like it was white sometime during the previous Caliphate. His beard is damp, his sandals mismatched, and his belt carries a frightening number of rusted tools and coiled wire. He surveys the scene, pokes a floor tile with a stick, and then sighs the sigh of a man who has seen things. "It's the pipe under the lion spout again," he says. Of course it is. That spout has been an issue since the year of the 3 dates. Everyone knows it. No one fixes it. Farid leans over. Do you remember the year the lion started spitting sideways? You do. The water shot directly into the towel pile. For days, bathers smelled like soggy cedar. Yusuf kneels, taps on the tile a few times, listens with his ear to the floor, like a steam whisperer, then produces what appears to be a bent fork and a prayer. He mutters to himself, pries up a slab of stone, and reaches into the darkness with the confidence of someone who has definitely been bitten by a pipe goblin before. Historians don't talk enough about plumbing in the Abbasid Caliphate, but they should. These bathhouses, with their multiple temperature zones, tiered water channels, and heating systems, were feats of engineering. Hypocaust heating, water delivery from underground qanats, gravity-fed pools, it's all beautiful on paper, until it clogs. Still, the bathhouse staff are professionals. They react quickly. Water is rerouted. Patrons redirected. A sign is posted in calligraphy, too elegant for a simple message. Rinse, room temporarily unavailable. We regret your damp inconvenience. And you, like many others, simply shift your schedule. You return to the warm chamber, squeeze onto a bench beside a butcher and a man who smells faintly of fish sauce, and resume your steam-based relaxation. Because in the hammam, even chaos has a rhythm. An older man begins telling a story, loudly for effect, about the time he slipped on a patch of soap and landed in a stranger's lap. We became friends, he adds. Shared towels for years, until he stole my scrub mitt. A few chuckle. Another chimes in it with his own tale of the time an earthquake hit mid-bath. The only casualty was a sandal. It was mourned for days. Even in minor disaster, the bathhouse finds its humor. Farid appears with a fresh towel. They're handing these out while they mop, he says, tossing you one. Only slightly damp. You nod. That's the name of your memoir. He bows. Chapter 1, I Sat on a Loofah. Eventually, Yusuf emerges from the rinse room, triumphant. His robe is soaked, his beard steaming, and he holds something in one hand that may once have been a sandal, now fossilized in soap. The flow is restored, he declares. A polite cheer ripples through the chamber. Someone claps, someone else pours a ceremonial cup of cool water over the lion spout in celebration. It behaves, this time. You glance down at your feet. The floor is dry again. Order has returned. Historians still argue whether these minor bathhouse disasters were viewed as routine or supernatural. Some blamed poor maintenance. Others invoked water spirits, architectural hubris, or particularly mischievous cats. You suspect it's a little of everything, but you love it. The way people come together, adjusting without drama. The way the rhythm never truly breaks, only stutters before falling back into pace. The way even failure feels part of the story. You wrap your towel tighter, sip your water, and consider starting a new personal tradition, giving thanks to the floor tiles that haven't betrayed you yet. You are amused, recently relocated, and suddenly fascinated by ancient plumbing logistics. You lean back, once again settled on a warm stone bench, this time a little further from the rebellious rinse room. The air has regained its rhythm, the gentle pulse of steam The occasional chuckle, the soft murmur of buckets being filled and emptied. Crisis averted, harmony restored, but something in the air feels different. Not the temperature. It's still a perfect balance between cloud and comfort. Not the scent. Still a mixture of oil, herbs, and the faintest whiff of wet marble. No, it's subtler than that. It's the feeling that the golden age of this particular hammam is beginning to show its age. You run your fingers along the tiles beneath you, still smooth, still intact, but a few of them are chipped at the edges, the grout darkened. The lion spout gurgles now, instead of roaring. Even the lamps seem to flicker more often, like they're working harder just to keep up. And you begin to wonder, not mournfully, but thoughtfully, about the slow decline of the hammam, not just this one, but all of them. Farid joins you, towel folded perfectly. You feel it, don't you? He says. You nod. The age in the bones of the building, he smiles. Or maybe the building in the bones of our age. Poetic, but not inaccurate. This hammam has stood for over a century, perhaps two, and yet, like the empire outside, its shine is not quite what it once was. The Caliphate no longer stretches its banners over every land between river and sea. Cities rise and fall, roads shift, dynasties burn and bloom again, and so do bathhouses. Some have already closed, others remain, but with fewer guests, fewer attendants, fewer copper basins that gleam like the sun. New buildings go up, square, efficient, unadorned. Water still flows, but not with ceremony. Heat is piped in, but without the crackle of wood or scent of eucalyptus. Historians argue over when the Golden Age truly ended. Was it after the Mongols sacked Baghdad in the 13th century, when trade routes shifted, when oil lamps were replaced by clumsy lanterns that hummed instead of flickered? Or maybe it never ended all at once. Maybe, like any long bath, the Golden Age just cooled slowly, barely noticed until someone remarked, "Is the water not as hot as it used to be?" You don't feel sorrow. Not exactly. More like a strange nostalgia for something that's still here, but gradually slipping into memory. Even the regulars seem aware. The old man with the fig-colored robe no longer stays until closing. The merchant from Kufa has started arriving less frequently. That one attendant, Mustafa, who used to whistle while folding towels, he hasn't been around in weeks. Farid sighs. I asked Sharif about it. He says the city's priorities are changing. People bathe at home now. They boil water in kettles. They read poems in solitude instead of steam. You picture someone in a stone townhouse, hunched over a bowl of warm water, scrubbing alone. No gossip, no jokes, no philosophical debates about whether Aristotle would have enjoyed cucumber-infused oil. It sounds lonely. You glance around. The hammam still breathes, but a little slower. The steam is thinner. The benches not quite as full, but it hasn't faded completely. Not yet. You hear someone humming again near the rinse basin. Someone else is telling a joke in Persian, laughing so hard he nearly drops his towel. A boy splashes his feet in a shallow pool, earning a gentle scolding and an affectionate ruffle of his hair. It's not over. It's just quieter. You begin to think of these places as relics, but living ones, like old trees that still flower, like stories retold, not because they're new, but because they still feel good in the mouth. And perhaps the hammam's decline is only part of its life cycle, a long exhale before the next breath. Some things disappear, others adapt. Farid nudges you. You ever hear about the hammam in Palermo? You shake your head. It was abandoned for years. Then someone bought it, fixed the roof, reopened it. Now it's full again, not just for baths, for music, for tea, for poetry readings and quiet arguments. You smile. Poetry in a bathhouse? What madness. He bows. I plan to headline their next event, steam sonnets for the tired soul. The steam swirls around you, catching the last light of the day. You close your eyes and imagine hammams blooming again, perhaps different, perhaps yet smaller, but still warm, still welcoming, still shaped like domes as full of sighs. The slow decline isn't an end. It's a rhythm. Everything cools. Then, maybe, everything warms again. You are reflective, warmed through, and quietly hopeful that not all echoes fade forever. The call to prayer floats through the air like a breeze dipped in gold, its sound softened by layers of stone and steam. You feel it ripple across the hammam, a quiet signal, not a demand, but a gentle nudge that the day, like the bath, is nearing its final rinse. You stand slowly, joints sighing with gratitude, and make your way toward the final chamber. The drying room. It's cooler here, though still comfortably warm, the sort of warmth that feels earned. The air is dry, the stones no longer slick, and the scent is subtler, less eucalyptus, more beeswax and rose. You breathe it in like a farewell. The room is quiet, though not silent. Attendants fold towels with the grace of dancers. Men recline on wooden loungers, wrapped in fresh cloths, their hair damp, their limbs heavy. One man rubs oil into his elbows while murmuring the lyrics of an old lullaby. Another is already asleep, snoring faintly into a tightly rolled cushion. You find an empty bench and sit, towel snug around your shoulders. An attendant offers you a fresh cup of cool hibiscus tea. You sip it slowly, savoring the tartness. Drying here is not just about moisture. It's about transition, from bath to world, from stillness to motion, from soft glow to city dust. You watch as a younger man, clearly new to the hammam, struggles to tie his turban with one hand while trying to keep his towel from becoming a tripping hazard. An older man steps in wordlessly, folds the cloth twice, tucks the end, and nods. This is what the hammam does best. It teaches by presence. No lectures, just motion, rhythm, imitation. You dry your feet carefully, remembering a saying you heard once. A clean foot carries fewer burdens. You don't know who said it, or whether it was meant literally or metaphorically. You choose to believe both. Farid returns, his hair now wrapped like a towel-based sculpture. "I am reborn," he declares, posing like a mythological figure. You look like a slightly overcooked kebab, you reply. He grins. A fragrant one. You stretch again, this time not from stiffness, but from satisfaction. Everything feels realigned, body, breath, even thought. One by one, bathers rise and prepare to leave. Robes are draped, coin purses gathered, sandals retrieved from the warm tile racks where they've been resting like sleepy animals. You follow suit. Your fingers brush against the marble door frame on your way out. Cooler now, touched by the last light of the day. Outside, the sun has dipped, and the city breathes in a new rhythm. The sky wears a robe of orange and lavender. Minarets glow like candle tips. You step into the courtyard, hair still damp, skin still tingling. The breeze catches you. It smells of spice and dust and far-off fires. You feel clean in a way that has nothing to do with soap. Fareed steps beside you, squinting at the horizon. Dinner? You nod. Something simple. He sighs. Lentils again. You both laugh and begin walking slowly, leaving wet footprints on dry stone. Behind you, the hammam continues, steam rising from its roof like incense, like memory, like the long exhale of a world that still knows how to pause. You are clean, restored, and quietly glowing. The warmth still lingers in your skin, soft and deep, like the last light of day pressing gently against your back. Your feet feel heavier now, but not in a tired way, more like they've remembered what it means to rest against stone, to step with intention. Each breath is longer, slower, the air cooler now, but not cold. It slides over your face like a silk cloth drawn through water. The voices of the hammam fade, not suddenly, but with a tapering grace, like music, ending on a chord that doesn't resolve, just dissolves into the air. You remember the shapes of tiles beneath your fingers, the scent of rose oil, the laughter echoing through steam, and the hush that followed every gentle splash. The world outside is waiting, yes, but it can wait a little longer. Right now, you let your breath deepen. You imagine the walls of the bathhouse still warm behind you, holding your shape as if saying, "Come back at any time." You picture a lamp flickering, the sound of water slipping into a copper basin, the soft hush of slippers on stone. You are still, you are here, and though the hammam has quieted, you carry its peace with you, like warmth folded inside your chest. Now, let your thoughts drift. Let the last drop of steam rise. Let sleep gather gently around your shoulders. Good night.